Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this City Council work session of March 24, 2026 to order. Welcome and thank you all for showing up in person and those of you who are joining us online. For those who don't know what we do in work session, it's mainly for council to receive information and to discuss items of interest to the city. An important item, we do not vote in work session. After council's had an opportunity to discuss the items at issue at hand, we will open it up. I'll open the floor up for public comment. With that, we're going to move down to new employee hire. Second item on the agenda, and from the city manager's office, Tracy Gollner.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council and citizens, I would like to introduce you to Danny Rosick. Danny Rosick comes to us with 20 years of serving in the United States Marine Corps. And then after that, he had spent the last 9 years as the Deputy Adjutant at MCAS New River. And we are so lucky and thankful to have him come to us to get to do his magic.
Happy to be here, and I'll be moving forward with the program and serving the public of Beaufort.
Welcome aboard, Danny. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, next from Public Works, Nate Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, everyone. I'd like to introduce one of our newest Parks employees, Tyler Oliveri. Did I get it? All right. So he came from New Jersey. He came down here with his girlfriend. We're lucky to have his family in the audience with us today. He worked a little bit with the city, more in the trash service before this. And unfortunately for us, another New Jersey Jets fan. So got a stack of them in the office now. But we're really glad to have him on. He's been with us for about 6 weeks, and he's really been taking charge. He's going to be in charge of the facilities here in the fire department. So we're very happy to have him on, and really proud of what he's done so far.
Okay, before we move into the next to a presentation, I'd like to recognize Alice Howard. She just joined us. She's chair of the Beaufort County Council. So thank you, Alice, for being here. Okay, next we have a mayoral proclamation that I'm going to present to the American Red Cross for American Red Cross Month. And Mike, do you have?
I would be glad to. Whereas in March, we celebrate American Red Cross Month by honoring our neighbors who make a humanitarian mission possible in Beaufort County. Every day, their acts of kindness change lives, bring relief, comfort, and hope when help can't wait. This compassionate spirit runs deep in our community, just as it has for 145 years through the American Red Cross. And whereas today, those who serve light the way during emergencies, whether it's delivering shelter, food, or comfort during disasters, providing a safe, life-saving blood supply for patients facing conditions like cancer treatment, childbirth complications, and traumatic injuries, assisting military members, veterans, and their families with 24/7 global support, or empowering individuals with skills like first aid and CPR. Whereas these collective efforts are a powerful reminder that the strength of our community lies in our shared commitment to one another. As we mark Red Cross Month, we celebrate our local heroes and resolve to continue lifting each other up, so no one faces an emergency alone. Now, therefore, Philip Cromer, Mayor of the City of Beaufort, South Carolina, by virtue of the authority vested in him by the laws of City of Beaufort, South Carolina, do hereby proclaim March 2026 as Red Cross Month. I encourage all citizens of Beaufort to reach out and support its humanitarian efforts. Sign this day. Congratulations.
On behalf of the American Red Cross of the Low Country, I just want to thank Mayor Cromer and the council for acknowledging our work that we do in the Low Country and Beaufort. Most people recognize the Red Cross because of our bloodmobiles or the large-scale disasters that we respond to that wreak havoc across the United States, but we respond here locally every day. Most people don't know that our number one disaster that we respond to every day is a home fire. So we respond to a home fire a day in the Low Country. And that's all in generosity to the time given by 800 plus volunteers in the Low Country alone. And we also serve our service to the armed forces at Parris Island and our local military members. So I just want to thank the council and Mayor Cromer for acknowledging our work. And for those of you that may not know, March is Red Cross Month, and we encourage you to come out, volunteer, donate your time, and get to know the organization a little bit. But thank you. I'm Megan Silsby. I'm the executive director. If you have any questions, let me know. It feels odd standing with my back towards you. And this is Brooks Tucker. He is a member of your community. He lives in Beaufort and he is on our board. So thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, next we have a presentation on the Cummins Foundation Grant Program update. Chief Price.
Right there. He's not ready quite yet. That one, Kathy? You good? Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone, Mayor, Council, all the citizens, staff. Thank you for having us here today. I'm here to introduce Dr. Dave Baker. He's with the Cummings Foundation, and thank you so much for your support you give us and their support they give him. So I am super excited that he's here to talk about our Officer Health and Wellness Initiative, and I will let him speak about it and what he does.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Good to see you all again. I think it was here about a year ago, and so I'm back, and I have good news and I think a very positive update to share 1 year later. The Officer Wellness Grant, April will mark, next week we'll be here for another health fair. It's a 1 year anniversary of the launch of the Cummings Foundation for Behavioral Health Wellness Program with the City of Beaufort Police Department. We provided, as you all know, a robust set of services in 2025. Participation amongst the officers was exceedingly high, continues to grow. The Foundation Board recognizes and respects the strong support for the program that's provided by Chief Price and the command staff. As a result of the national coverage, you remember last year we had some pretty good media coverage of the opening of the wellness program. As a result of that coverage, we saw a significant increase. The foundation saw a significant increase in interest in our police wellness program. The Beaufort Police Department now is the flagship, recognized by the foundation as the flagship program in our services. It provides a model for other departments. Given the success of the program in Beaufort over the last 12 months, the Foundation Board decided at their annual meeting in November to expand services to other interested departments. And those include Danbury, Connecticut, Milton, Ohio, Barrington, New Jersey, and Ramapo, New York. The Foundation Board also decided, because of the success here in Beaufort, to fund these programs, including the Beaufort program, for the next 5 years. So you may not have to see me every year, but funding will be intact for the next 5 years. Just as a quick update, what we'll be offering in 2026, these are many of the same services that the foundation provided last year for officer health and wellness. That includes the semi-annual health fairs with biometric screenings. Those will be happening next week. The full gym schedule with the gym that was built out in the department. Annual mental wellness checks, which are ongoing now. We've just about completed outfitting a recovery room for the officers. We'll be providing a program of peer support training. I'm here now monthly providing on-site psychoeducational support. We're going to be talking with Chief Price and the command staff about a regional public safety wellness symposium highlighting the work of the City of Beaufort and the City of Beaufort Police Department in advancing officer wellness. And we also provide, alongside the health screening that'll happen next week, consultation with a nutritionist and dietitian that's offered to all the officers. So I wanted to make that brief, but I wanted to give you a quick update. Thank you again for your support. The foundation is, headquartered in Reno, Nevada, but they keep up close contact with what's happening here through me. And I just want, again, to say that they're very impressed, very pleased, and happy to lend their support to the effort. So,
We thank you for your investment for the next 5 years.
yeah, me too. Thank you.
Good. Okay, next, we have a discussion of short-term rentals ordinance. Kurt Freeze, is he in the house? This is what everybody came for.
Okay, at your first reading, you made 6 amendments, which I think created the crowd in the room. So I don't know how you wanted to do this, but did you want to talk about each one of the amendments first and then have the, I guess, public come up and speak on the issue at hand?
Yeah, I think that'd be the appropriate thing to do.
Okay, the first amendment you made was to remove the, essentially the first reading, the draft that we had an exemption for the grandfathered units so they wouldn't count against the cap. I think the council, on your vote, you agreed to basically remove that exemption, so that would go away. So essentially, those grandfathered units would now all count against the cap. So short-term rentals in the future would be a little tighter, right? There'd be less, less short-term rentals available with that exemption. Then the next one, I think the reason why a lot of people are here is the removal of the point exemption. So in the previous code, the point was basically short-term rentals were prohibited on the point. And I think with the majority vote, at the first reading, it was voted to remove that exemption. The feeling was that it was unfair to have just one neighborhood pointed out. So that I think is probably going to produce a lot of discussion here later. Next was the removal of the basically the investor short-term rental accessory dwelling unit restriction. So the code that you saw last week had a restriction where if you were an investor and you owned a short-term rental, you couldn't use your accessory dwelling unit as a short-term rental, should you get a short-term rental. Only an owner-occupied short-term rental could use an ADU or a pool house or something of that nature. So that was removed with a favorable vote on first reading as well. Next, and this is all in your packet, I'm just trying to go quick because I know you got a lot of people here want to talk. The conveyance, basically, what we had is basically every time a deed was transferred, it would trigger essentially if the property was grandfathered or the neighborhood was capped out, you would basically lose, that property would lose its short-term rental license and it would go to a wait list. The question came up from one of the councilmen that if it was a corporation basically transferring to another, selling to another corporation, this would not trigger that transfer of deed. And so that's something that our city attorney, who's I believe is here, is going to work on. So that's captured. So every time a corporation sells to another corporation, that would also trigger this whole basically short-term rental ordinance. And, if the neighborhood was capped, you wouldn't be able to get a new short-term rental if you did that.
Will we have something on that before our meeting in April?
You will have some, yes, in April, but because it's just been less than a week, we didn't have a chance to get that already. Appeals, we did meet and determined another vote that you had is you wanted the allowance to have an appeal should a property owner or an investor wish to have an additional short-term rental. It was discussed as a special exception. So we've determined that because it's no longer a zoning issue, since we're creating its own business license section of the code for short-term rentals, that would have to be a different process, but we'll have to work on that by second reading. Obviously the concern is you could have a lot of these appeals because a lot of people might want 2 short-term rentals. So that's just a staff level concern. And then the nuisance, you wanted the 3 strikes to come back, and we'll work to put that back in the ordinance for second reading. So those were the 6 things that you kind of motioned on and had a favorable motion on at the first reading. And so with that, I can answer any questions or sit back down.
Okay, council have any questions? Okay, does council want to have any words to say or discuss any items before we open it up to the public comment?
No, but I guess I'll just try to make one point of clarification, Kurt, and this is in regards to the appeals section or the special exception. And I know that we'll see something after legal goes over it, but just wanted to point out, because you made the comment that there's the potential that a lot of people would potentially appeal for multiple short-term rentals per lot. My thinking on that language is captured in the first bullet there. The multiple short-term rentals were lawfully established and operating or permitted prior to the effective date of this amendment. So it would only be relevant for those that were approved prior and have more than one short-term rental in those special cases. And then they would still need to be granting that the exception will not materially undermine the purpose of the citywide cap, adjacency requirements, or neighborhood character. So just wanted to point that out because this wouldn't be something that would be available for new property owners who were seeking more than one short-term rental per lot.
I will try to capture that by second reading with some amended language, so.
And I'll make one comment just for clarification from the standpoint, and I know Ben will probably address this from the standpoint of the corporations, but if a corporation transfers property and there's remuneration from the standpoint of a purchase price, it does trigger the reassessment. So a corporation that transfers property with zero assets does not trigger an asset reassessment. So unless they're doing it for free, or if they're wholly purchased by a corporation and then become a new corporation by name, they would always generate a reassessment.
Okay. And I think he's going to work on that because I think it's very complicated, so.
Yeah, but anytime,
leave the attorney
anytime money
to that.
transfers,
Sure.
the county wants to get their share, so it would reassess.
One thing, we had talked about notification when there is a short-term rental. Are we
That
going to
was in
notify?
your code at the first reading,
Right.
so
Are we
the
gonna
adjoining property would get notified.
Okay, are they going to be notified when the person applies or
It was when the
after?
permit was issued, they'd get notified.
Okay,
That's how the code reads it.
okay, should they not have, a say, be able to comment before?
I think the challenge would be it's not really a public hearing. So you would get notice. I mean, any action is like appealable. I think you can, again, ask your city attorney within 30 days. So, I think you'd have that 30-day period. So if you want to make an amendment and you want to have it on the application of the short-term rental permit, we could change the code. I think it's
We
just
asked
the way it's written.
Ben to look at that.
Sure, we could.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, I'm going to open it up for public comment. I have a list of people who have signed up to speak. I'm going to call your name when you come up to the dais. Because of the number of people, we're going to try to limit it like we do in regular meetings to 5 minutes. It would be better if you could do it shorter because we've got quite a few people. But come up, give us your name and your address, and I'm going to call the first person, that is Beth Grace.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Councilman. My name is Beth Grace, and I live at 509 North Street. And I have given a copy of my comments to Clerk to Council, and I can update those for you, Tracy, because I've made some changes. Okay, thank you. So as a backdrop to the short-term rental, which I'll call STR from here on out, I wanted to give a bit of history. In my memory, after the financial downturn in 2008, some newer residents in town wanted City Council to address short-term rentals in the city. The thinking is that it would fix up older homes. These were in public comments and public meetings. Fix up the older homes in the National Historic Landmark District, yet be good business opportunities. The city then included all neighborhoods in the discussion, except those exempt by homeowner association regulations. I have no clue as to how or why the Northwest Quadrant and Old Commons were exempted from the 6% cap. Apparently, according to the staff's first reading background, the numbers are now around 20% in those neighborhoods, which has a negative impact on the community culture. It also limits long-term rentals and affordability on many levels. When the ordinance was debated in the mid-2000s, the Point Neighborhood Association took a poll of all residents on the point. It was almost unanimous to prohibit STRs because we already are commercial enough. So we responded to the city request for input to be exempt because, one, we had many tours already licensed by the city, which daily pass through our neighborhood, daily, weekly, or monthly. Number two, the streets are narrow, with many homeowners having to park along the streets, effectively making some streets one way. Three, the core commercial being right next to our neighborhood creates employees, employers, and tourists parking on the streets. And four, the downtown festivals and events create parking problems, congestion, and safety issues, one of which was just addressed this past year by the city police department because we couldn't even enter or exit our neighborhood during a parade. Five, many streets have tight corners and a blind view as you come up to the corner to turn. Six, emergency vehicle access is hampered. Seven, the National Historic Landmark District and the Reconstruction Era Park designation creates heavy tourism traffic. Eight, the many hotels, motels, inns, and STRs already permitted in the core commercial and office commercial, plus the many STRs already permitted throughout the city, create a great deal of congestion for us. The residents of our neighborhood are very supportive of the National Historic Landmark District and the Reconstruction Era Park and the tours. We're very welcoming to all tourists and tours. We voluntarily allow charities and community organizations to be hosted by us with strict rules on how and where to park and notifying our neighbors of an event that's going to occur. The PNA, the Neighborhood Association, represented the residents of the point in 2017 and 2018 to ask to be exempt. The city staff and planning commission and city attorney all approved it. They again recommended it in this version of the ordinance that the point remain exempt for the many issues expressed. We are respectfully requesting that City Council maintain their trust in the Planning Commission, the staff, the citizens who served on the committees for the past year, and the city attorney, who all concurred that the point remain exempt from short-term rentals. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, next we have Jean Grace.
He was kind of cute.
How did I work this machine?
My name is Gene Grace. I live at 509 North Street, and I have lived on the point for 51 and a half years. I have here, I come before you again with this time 2 petitions. One is from residents of the point, 217 signatures, which represents about 90% of our neighbors. We have only 4 people that refuse to sign. The other are 158 signatures of non-residents who live off the point, who love our neighborhood the way it is. They're the walkers, the dog walkers, the bicyclers, the exercisers. Both Councilman Scalati and Mitchell intimated at the March 10th meeting that all on the point signed a petition, we would have no problem with STRs. General Mitchell also said we could regulate ourselves. The problem with that is that, as in most neighborhoods, there's a lot of change. We have people moving in and out all the time, basically. And I would like to give y'all a very real. This is the Edward Means house, which faces the green. It literally comprises 1/2 a block. And it's for sale. You'll notice, I think you can notice in the bottom, very far right-hand corner, there's a for sale sign. An investor or owner could have 6 or 7 guest rooms there. This is this is the side yard. It's also just as big as the backyard. The owner, investor could have a house. He could build another house in the backyard. There's ample room for parking and there's ample room for an event tent. What a wonderful wedding venue. I know from personal experience from the Lounge Grove House in Charleston, it is sold out every single weekend for a year, having weddings there and other functions, basically. Event parking, well, it's wonderful for this. It would be the green, basically. They could park all around and on the green. As you can see, this is not exactly ideal. The Beans House is not a unique situation. This is the John Fripp Chaplain House on Washington Street. It just sold last year, maybe the year before, I'm not really sure. It's about the same size, house and yard, in every way as the Edward Means House. There are 10 such houses on the point that pretty much fills the bill. 6 of these could easily be placed outside of the 300-foot requirement, making an STR possible. So in conclusion, gentlemen, STRs would change the neighborhood dramatically and not particularly for the good. I ask you, please, do not kill the goose that laid the golden egg. I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene. Okay, next is Nancy Russell.
Good afternoon. Hear me? All right, because she was saying something right before I got here. My name is Nancy Russell. I live at 4011 Craven Street. I, like many others in our neighborhood, purchased our home with the understanding that short-term rentals were prohibited. I came from an area where short-term rentals destroyed the community and destroyed affordable housing. In fact, Mr. Scaletti, we had a long conversation about this 2 years ago at the Point Picnic, that with Beaufort wanting affordable housing, the worst thing to have is short-term rentals. Thus, the city's actions are at best confusing. Most were pleased to see that the city stated they need to restrict short-term rentals. The comprehensive plan adopted by the city in 2022 had a goal for beautiful and stable neighborhoods. Short-term rentals are the antithesis of this. I anticipated some sort of moratorium of short-term rentals. However, this end result may eventually help with clustering. However, the current plan allows for 64 to 74% increase in the number of short-term rentals. Based on the cap, and there's a lot of variables depending upon if you consider pending or if the point is included in this. There's been confusion in the matter of prohibited areas for short-term rentals. The Planning Commission proposed 5 areas and had 5 others where they did nothing with regard to short-term rentals. More confusing when you look at the zoning map, there's certain areas that aren't even zoned, so they're not considered at all. When the city proposed this, there was only the point as being prohibited. Once City Council removed the prohibition on the point, deeming it privileged not to have short-term rentals in their neighborhood, things became really confusing. In response to a letter from a concerned resident, Mr. Scaletti stated, under the ordinance being considered, the short-term rentals would be capped at 6% of residential lots. Based on my understanding of the number of lots in the point, that would likely equate to 6 to 10 properties in total. My understanding is that there is already 6 operating today, meaning only a very small number could be eligible in the future. Honestly, word around the neighborhood, no offense, Mr. Scaletti, was you were confusing short-term with long-term because they were prohibited in the point. We weren't supposed to have any short-term rentals. But surprise, surprise, it turns out, despite members of City Council propounding the privilege of the point being exempt from short-term rentals, they had in fact defined the prohibition and permitted 6 in our neighborhood. And in looking at the statistics, this out of the 25 neighborhoods listed, there are 14 neighborhoods with less short-term rentals than we have in a prohibited neighborhood. This specific prohibition did not include grandfathering or exceptions Basic black letter law states the specific overrides the general, which means there should be no short-term rentals, period. It's what the city indicated when they said the point shouldn't be exempt, giving that we're privileged. We had no privilege. Our only privilege was we had a law or an ordinance that the city ignored. They said, oh, maybe it's based on mixed use on Carteret. One of these is on North Street. And still, Carteret is considered under the city's own definition as being part of the point. You should never have been allowed. To quote in off-quote Seinfeld, why have the regulation if you're not going to enforce the regulation? The city, after we hear this from the city, they advised that unlike Mr. Scalati's statement of 0 to 4 new short-term rentals, this would mean an additional 6 short-term rentals in the Points neighborhood. Why the difference from Mr. Scalati? Who knows? Are they defining what the area of the point is differently? I don't know. The confusion of the percentage being counted is also becomes more of an issue as the proposal originally before City Council, page 53, C3, stated that it would be based on the number of dwelling units, which was defined in section B. Discussions, after all, when the City Council was discussing matters, they were discussing parcels. The March 19th letter to City Councils continues to say it is based on dwelling units. However, section 7-18002A1 states no more than 6% of the residential lots, no longer dwelling units. There's no definition in the code, or there's no definition anywhere other than saying, look at the zoning map. Considering this whole regulation is based on a percentage, everyone needs to know what exactly you're including. So zoning, it treats everyone differently, and we don't have food trucks, and because of the nature of our neighborhood. It is not STR, I would say the fact that the thing went off that, the plan is that our historic neighborhoods will continue to be protected and conserved to ensure the vitality and enjoyment for future generations. That was part of the plan. Short-term rentals do not serve this goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have Tierney Stone.
For each council member. Good evening, council members. Tierney Stone, Beaufort resident and business owner, former resident of the Point at 504 East Street, and former Airbnb owner at 2606 North Street, Beaufort, South Carolina. I currently reside in Pigeon Point at 802 Lafayette Street. In my allotted time this evening, I would like to give a brief but comprehensive overview of the cities where residents have successfully fought and won their fights to keep short-term rentals out of their neighborhoods. I'm disappointed to be here speaking with you this evening. To expect our elected council members to support the clearly expressed wishes of residents who voted for them is the very foundation of fair and responsive local government. Instead, it appears they are choosing to push forward with lifting the STR ban in one of our neighborhoods despite widespread opposition from our community and other downtown neighborhoods such as the Northwest Quadrant. In the document that I've just handed to the secretary, other parts of the country have shown that it is possible and reasonable for residents' rights to be respected and defended when short-term rentals are being introduced into established single-family neighborhoods, supported in many cases by court-backed legal precedents. Let's start with the cities that have already banned or severely limited short-term rentals. Charleston, South Carolina, New Orleans, New York City, Santa Monica, California, Fort Worth, Texas, Miami, and Miami Beach, Florida. These bans have held firm because residents have demanded them, and courts have consistently backed them. Some court victories worth noting. In Nantucket, resident Catherine Ward won in Massachusetts Land Court in 2025. The judge ruled that whole home STRs are simply not a permitted use in the historic district. Park Township, Michigan enforced its 50-year-old residential ban. The Circuit Court upheld it completely in 2025. Fayetteville, Arkansas saw its strict ordinance upheld by the state Supreme Court in 2025. McCall, Idaho won on occupancy caps and parking rules. And in New Orleans, federal courts, including Judge Zaney and the Fifth Circuit in 2025, dismissed a corporate challenge from Airbnb, ruling there is no fundamental right to short-term renting. Right now, in 2026, residents are actively working towards having fewer, not more, short-term rentals in their neighborhoods. Again, a few examples worth noting. In Simi Valley, California, every neighborhood council and the Planning Commission just recommended a full citywide ban after overwhelming opposition to short-term rental regulation. Long Beach, California, neighbors are using block-by-block petitions to revoke existing permits. One neighborhood has already succeeded, with 9 more underway. Yet, Beaufort Council is doing the exact opposite. Its recent motion to lift the ban on short-term rentals in the Historic Point neighborhood directly contradicts the national trend and the successful resident-led protections we see elsewhere in the country. And one must also ask, why now? Of all the pressing issues facing Beaufort, carefully balancing growth to keep our city small, beautiful, and protected from the overdevelopment that has overwhelmed other southern cities in recent years, why prioritize lifting restrictions in the Historic Point neighborhood? This is an area that already embraces and seamlessly supports tourism through carriage rides, walking tours, and golf cart tours, amongst other things mentioned this evening. Why make this neighborhood the focus of change when so many other challenges demand attention in our rapidly growing city? Across the country, when cities and residents stand together to safeguard their neighborhoods, courts have reportedly and decisively upheld residents' rights to ban short-term rentals. There is a rock-solid foundation in place on this subject. Our strong preference here is for thoughtful dialogue and a decision that reflects the clear will of the community and the lessons learned nationwide. But should it become necessary, the overwhelming body of precedent shows that residents who seek to preserve their neighborhoods through reasonable measures stand on very firm ground. You will all have copies of the full document where I list all of these cases in detail, city by city, and legal case by legal case. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Bobby Malia.
Thank you. Bobby Melia, 316 Hancock Street in the Point. A few minutes ago, Jean Grace talked about the real problem and what makes it impossible for the residents to self-regulate. The real problem being investor-owned short-term rentals in the Point. And in fact, he showed a picture of a house currently for sale on the market that would for us represent the nightmare scenario. I don't need to rehash the reasons, but I will say that that's entirely the type of house that would be a magnet for investment. You could put a lot of people in there, as you would say, be booked up. You know, you come, you're right next to the big chill house. You're going to walk in the footsteps of Barbra Streisand. It's got the perfect marketing. It'd be booked forever. I've walked my Labrador Retriever through the green probably 2,000 times. There's an equally large and equally attractive to an investor group house on the exact opposite side of the green. I know there's a 300-foot restriction, and despite having walked there thousands of times, I can't tell you if it's like just over 300 feet or just under 300 feet, but we ought not to proceed in ignorance. If one such house being snapped up by investors is a nightmare scenario, 2 such houses being snapped up in a micro area like the green is the nightmare on Elm Street scenario. And because that area is so small, even a small number of houses turned into short-term rentals will compound the problem. They'd compound the noise problem, and probably more importantly, they'd compound the response time problems for ambulances and fire trucks in an emergency. I know that city councilors care about the Point. I've talked to one city councilor. I had sat next to him at lunch not long ago. I know he's concerned. I remember Josh walking down King Street when residents were concerned about the large pumping station proposed for the Point, asking for neighborhood opinions. I know you guys are concerned. And this is the the type of an issue that probably is best understood by actually walking the ground, which is easy to do because it's so small and so compact. You can see how these problems would just mushroom and compound. The evidence is clear and overwhelming against allowing investor-owned short-term rentals in the most heavily touristed neighborhoods in America's historic cities. And that's what the point is. It's the most heavily touristed area in Beaufort. That's why there's a national groundswell of legislation protecting these neighborhoods. The groundswell is not being caused by any application of favoritism or special privilege. It's happening because public officials in those cities are responding to the facts on the ground and to citizen concerns. I hope the many concerns that have heard and will hear this afternoon and this evening will persuade you not to proceed with this idea. But if a majority is determined to pursue this, I urge the council to proceed in the spirit of the process used to develop the citywide review. If you must target the point for more short-term rentals, then please direct the Planning Commission to evaluate the pros and cons of such a move, specifically as it would relate to the point. Ask the city's professional staff to gather the data needed to evaluate these concerns and tell you whether they're valid or whether residents are just being overly emotional. I think if you do that, you will make the right decision. And above all, we all know once short-term rentals are embedded in a neighborhood, you need a crowbar to get them out. This is our only chance to do it right. There's no need to short-circuit the process and rush to open the residential heart of the point to non-resident investors without a thorough understanding of the likely consequences. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Okay, next we have Karen Schwartzman.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Karen Schwartzman, and I too live at 316 Hancock Street in the Point neighborhood. I'm here to offer my thoughts on the lack of public purpose in the amendment to allow short-term rentals in the Point neighborhood. From the replies received to so many of the letters that have been written to you on this topic, I understand that your overarching objective is to promote equity and fairness. First, some context. Some may not realize that neighborhoods like Islands of Beaufort, Reboat Island, Cottage Farm, City Walk, and Battery Point are free of short-term rentals by virtue of their homeowners association bylaws, which prohibit them entirely. So knowing that, it appears you are trying to create equity for everyone other than those homeowners who are already protected against the adverse impacts of short-term rentals by promulgating a law for the Point that says what's bad for everyone else should be bad for you too. Is that the public purpose behind this amendment? This amendment has no public purpose. Property restrictions are among the most powerful tools local governments have. They shape where families live, where businesses operate, and what kind of communities we create and promote. But these restrictions are not one size fits all, and deliberately so. Local governments set rules by district precisely because different neighborhoods have different needs and different pressures. What works in one context can cause real harm in another. Good law respects those distinctions. The power to allow or restrict property use carries responsibility. It's supposed to be exercised for the benefit of the public, not for the private gain of a few. This amendment fails that test. Ask yourselves, who benefits from this? Not neighbors. They bear the costs of increased traffic, noise, parking congestion, trash accumulation, public safety risk, and instability. You have acknowledged as much. Not hoteliers in Beaufort who compete with Airbnbs and VRBOs for customers and who pay the price in their reduced occupancy rates. Not Beaufortonians seeking affordable housing. Short-term rentals reduce housing supply and drive rents up. And not other neighborhoods which gain absolutely nothing by virtue of having short-term rentals in the point. The sole beneficiaries of this misguided amendment would be a small number of investors who would be able to purchase houses in an historic neighborhood and convert them to short-term rentals. Courts have long held that laws must have a rational connection to a legitimate public interest, health, safety, welfare, or the general good of the community. A measure that transfers benefits from the public to private individuals turns that principle on its head. I urge the council to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartzman. Okay, next we have Brenda Litchfield.
Hi, Brenda Litchfield, 808 Hamilton Street, and I'm going to speak about the tours and things that we have in our neighborhood, which we welcome, and we enjoy meeting people from other countries and other states, and we're good guardians of what we do. But I think that people probably don't know the extent of what we do. I'm going to go fast, I promise. There are 25 different things that come through our neighborhood, sometimes on a regular basis and sometimes not. We have 2 carriage tours that come by. They can come every 20 minutes from 9:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. We have bus tours. They can come 3 a day, 6 days a week, the Kelly bus tours that everybody sees. We have 5 walking tours that come through, and they have from 10 to 20 people in each one. There's no limit per day, and they can come from 9:30 till 8 o'clock at night. We have 3 golf cart tours. They can come every 15 minutes from 9:30 to 6:30 at night. We have self-guided tours. We have a Beaufort Churches tour and we have a Beaufort Tree Walk. And they can have individuals or like the Tree Walk, sometimes garden clubs come through there that have up to 30 people walking down the streets. We have seasonal tours. We have the Kappa Ghost tours, which come for 9 days in October every year. And they raise, I called them today, they raise between $30,000 and $40,000 with that one event alone, which we're really happy that we can help nonprofits. We also have a lot of connections with HBF, where they use our neighborhood, and it's okay. They use our neighborhood for the fall tour of homes, which can put 750 people in our neighborhood on that one day. The fall tour brunch, which puts 50 people, 350. Now, they don't come in every year. They alternate years in other places. We have the St. Peter's Christmas tour of homes that comes every couple years, and that's probably 100 people. We have the Lafayette Soiree, which HBF, which for the second year in a row is on the point, and that puts 350 people in. And then we have miscellaneous tours. I mean, the other day I backed out of my driveway and I wasn't quite looking, and I almost hit a group of 10 people on bicycles. So we have the bicycle tours that come sporadically in good weather. And then all year long, we have the people that have the bicycles that the hotels have. They come from Beaufort Inn, they come from Emerald, and so they're around all the time. The First African Baptist Church has started getting some tours that people are interested and want to see the historic value of that. We have running clubs. They come on the weekends, and there can be from 10 to 20 people in a running club that are running through the neighborhood. The Beaufort International Film Festival that's here every year, they have lots of people on their 3 or 4 day event, and they walk around the neighborhood all the time. And, you know, we're happy to see these people. What I'm just trying to point out is that we've got a lot more than carriage tours. Number 23 is photography clubs come and they walk around the neighborhood and they take pictures of everything. Then we have garden club tours when people open up their yards for people to look at. All year long, we have tourist walkers that walk around, and we have cars driving through there all the time. I mean, I can't even go out with my hair in curlers anymore because I'm going to see somebody. So I just wanted to point out that we do a lot. I mean, we do a lot more than just the carriage tours. And if you had just the carriage tours, the golf cart tours, the walking tour, and the bus tour, and if they each made just one trip a day, that would be almost 4 $1,000 back into the community, just one trip, and they can go from 9:30 to, 6 o'clock at night. So we are special, and we are special because we are good ambassadors. So we just don't need any more short-term rentals to make any more congestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Litchfield. Okay, next we have Alexandra Hendrickson.
Good evening. So what I say is dovetails on what Brenda's just said. My name is Alexandra Hendrickson, and I live at 301A New Street in the Point. I've owned my house since 2011 for 15 years, and I'm here with many of my neighbors. Our houses are in the south end of the Point and closest to Bay Street. And so our greatest concern about short-term rentals in the Point are the adverse consequences to tourism and also to neighborhood safety from additional parking congestion. So we're concerned that the short-term rentals will increase parking congestion because they'll bring more people and cars into the historic Point District. The streets in our neighborhood are narrow, and many residents have to park on the street because they don't have private parking. Because of this, a two-way street often becomes a one-way street. Often I have to pull over and park when there's oncoming traffic, particularly a delivery van or construction vehicle. Or as actually coming here tonight, there was both a construction truck and a golf cart, tour, and all three of us were trying to maneuver through the street. Furthermore, in our area, retail and restaurant workers, as well as downtown shoppers, park their car along the Point's narrow streets because they don't have free parking downtown. So short-term rentals will worsen these parking issues with more cars, RVs, and trailers crowding into our neighborhood for overnight stays. So we're concerned also that STRs may impede historic appreciation because the golf carts, horse and buggies, minivans, and all the other things Brenda mentioned that show off our beautiful neighborhood to our visitors will be compelled to maneuver around more parked cars and obstructions that will slow them down and spoil the sightseers' enjoyment of our beautiful historic treasures. And the same with pedestrians. There's no sidewalks in the Point. And so tourists who stroll our neighborhoods on foot have to compete for street space with the cars. And so if our visitors have to expend energy dodging more cars and park cars, that will be an additional deterrent to visitors coming to our famous and charming Point. So, and then finally, a point that several other people have mentioned, but it's a big concern, emergency rescue vehicles and ambulances, which are already challenged to weave through our narrow streets, may be blocked from preventing fires and other disasters that could just destroy the neighborhood altogether. So for these reasons, we would like to request that the current code remain the way it is and that short-term rentals not be allowed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next is Jeff Hamrick. I did. I'll get him next.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman. I looked at the I'm Jeff Hamrick. I live at 502 Washington Street. When I first heard about this proposal, I looked at the economic impact. And quite frankly, I'm going to have a recurring question. What is it exactly we're solving for? Because my math doesn't add up. The Point is not nearly a neighborhood. It's the primary engine of Beaufort's $1.5 billion tourist industry. I've provided a document, all my numbers, there's gonna be a lot of them, I've cited for you. So $1.5 billion tourist industry for Beaufort. You can Google, Travelocity, TripAdvisor, anybody, any platform in the country, ask them what the #1 thing to do in Beaufort is. It's to walk the point. Okay, so why are they walking the point? It's a centerpiece of the National Historic Landmark District. It drives heritage tourism. It attracts nearly 2 million visitors annually. Is there value in authenticity? I'll get to that in a second. Visitors don't come to Beaufort for a generic lodging district. They come for a living historic neighborhood. The tourism paradox, expanding SDRs in the point trades Beaufort's most valuable historic long-term asset for short-term concentrated private gains. So what are we solving for? The risk when neighborhoods become de facto hotel zones, the soul that creates the market value for the city of Beaufort is lost. Tourism declines when authenticity is lost. There's studies I'll talk about in a second, others have talked about. Data shows that the SDR growth is currently disproportional already in Beaufort. It's gone up 42% in the last 3 years. That's something for you to look at. Why does it go up? There's a revenue disparity. A short-term rental is roughly twice what the same property does as a long-term rental. The average is $40,500 per year for SDRs in Beaufort, and as opposed to $20,000 a year for long-term rentals. So there's a lot of incentive for investors. Is that what we want? Is that what we're solving for, investors? All right, what has this caused? It's caused a supply crisis. Currently, STRs in Beaufort outnumber long-term rentals by 3 to 1. It's created an inventory imbalance already. There are currently only 100 long-term rentals available in Beaufort, as opposed to over 250 short-term rentals. So what's the economic impact of that? 41% of Beaufort households are renters. They're part of our functioning economy. There's teachers, there's firemen, there's healthcare workers, there's service staff. How about the Department of Defense? I spent the last 20 years working at the Pentagon. I worked through BRAC. We currently have an issue housing DOD in Beaufort. Adding SDRs to that increases that. That's $2.5 billion annually by the military bases here in Beaufort. Do we want to exacerbate that problem? Is that what we're solving for? My neighbors are smart. I didn't know they were going to talk about, they talked about the recent studies. I looked at the studies in the Southeast, Charleston, Savannah, Asheville, New Orleans. They've all done the same thing. They allowed it and then they reversed it. Even Charleston, as a global tourism powerhouse, had to rescind the loosening of the STRs. As with New Orleans, Asheville, it's part of what I provided. So, are we solving for a hotel crisis? I don't think so. Current occupancy in Beaufort is under 70%. So we're not solving for a capacity. Infrastructure saying, unlike hotels, SDR clusters increase the burden on residential, street parking, emergency services without providing centralized infrastructure in a commercial district. Revenues at stake. Tourism and hospitality taxes, A-tax, H-tax, are our third largest revenue source for the city of Beaufort. Do you guys collect that on SDRs? No, you don't. So what are we solving for? What are you guys trying to fix? Sorry. Gentlemen, council, what are we fixing here? So, yeah, sorry.
You wrap it up.
In closing, policy recommendation. Maintain the STR prohibition on the biggest engine of the $1.5 billion tourist industry in Beaufort. Prioritize long-term housing. We're getting a crisis. We're going in the wrong direction. Provide density limits. Protect the neighborhood and protect Beaufort's economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Matt, that I left you off the first time, but Matt McElhaney. Oh, there he is.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, my name is Matt McElhaney. I live at 502 Craven Street. I want to talk to you about quality of life, not just in my neighborhood, but in the city of Beaufort at large. While I'm a 40-year resident of the Point neighborhood, living in a home that has been in my family for 4 generations, I was raised on Verdier Bluff, adjacent to the hospital park, attended Mossy Oaks Elementary, Beaufort Junior High School, and ultimately back to Mossy Oaks to attend Beaufort High School. As a child, I played sports on organized teams and leagues that practiced and played in the 100 Pines, Dixonville area, baseball at Bob Jones Field, the Northwest Quadrant, basketball at Lynn Brown Gym, and tennis at the city courts. And finally, football in Pigeon Point at the Basil Green Complex. This is all to say that I believe I know my city and I know a great deal of its citizenry. And I know they, like the Point residents, value a quality of life that is concerned with safety and security, noise pollution, traffic congestion, and sanitation. They desire parks and green spaces, walkability and bike-friendly pathways, tennis courts, and more. But most importantly, I believe they desire a sense of community and social cohesion. The well-regarded architect Jan Gehl said, "We shape cities, then they shape us." Each of the neighborhoods I named above, the city shaped, and then they shaped us, based on location of current parks, fields, bike paths, green spaces, tennis and basketball courts, and houses. Each one of the neighborhoods is owed a thank you from the other for graciously welcoming us and others to share in what has been shaped. In the Point neighborhood, we are shaped by the historic houses in which we live. These houses we share with many, including droves of wonderful and welcome tourists roaming the streets, viewing the houses on the outside daily and occasionally on the inside when we open our homes for tours. If you are a Point resident, you are essentially residing in a living museum, and you are a curator and a janitor at that museum, seemingly working daily to keep up the historic home in which you reside. Because the houses are old, they require extensive upkeep. Carpenters start to roll in at around 7:30 to help the curators. The carpenters fill the neighborhoods with trucks, vans, backhoes, forklifts, skill saws, and more. It's a bit of a necessary circus created by the Point residents. It's chaotic, but it's a necessary evil. Back to the museum that opens up daily, on top of the circus that we've created. The doors to this museum open at approximately 8 a.m. and winds down in the early evening. This wind down is, of course, after multiple horse carriage tours, golf cart tours, vans and small bus tours, walking tours, and tours in cars, bikes, and golf carts that have all made their way from street to street. It's time to exhale, and the museum makes its way to closing time. In the early evening, the neighborhood falls into a lull, and this is when that most important quality of life issue takes place that we all share. A sense of community and social cohesion manifests itself in the form of neighbors walking dogs, neighbors visiting neighbors on porches for cocktails, dinner parties, and kids playing late into summer evenings. The living museum has put its head down for the night. But wait, not the case if you live next door to an SDR. Essentially a 24/7 hotel, the museum, while not as intense, marches on, as the houses that hold STRs will be open for arrivals as they figure out the keys to the doors, unintentionally trigger alarm codes that bring fire trucks, unload their cars, and start the party hours for the living museum. This is all because the profile of the STR renters will almost certainly be different in the Point. Golfers, wedding party attendees, bachelor and bachelorette party attendees, girlfriend getaways. These rentals will be far more prevalent than your family of 4 attending Paris Island graduation. The STR renters of the Point will almost certainly be more celebratory at times as they make their way, walking and talking loudly in the narrow streets, sitting on verandas high above the ground, chatting into the early morning hours, not meaning to do harm, but still the deed will have been done, regardless of the calls and shout-outs that we can make to the powers that be in attempt to correct it all. The quality of the lives of the residents of the Point will have forever been altered because of the streets that shaped us, and the very houses that shaped us. Mr. Mayor and Councilman, we are here now calling out to the powers that be, requesting, pleading that you not thrust upon the Point neighborhood potential harm, all for what? The benefit of the few elite that will hold an SDR license to aggrandize their lot while diminishing the quality of life for others who reside in the close proximity. Please reject this amendment.
Yeah. Okay, next we have Tom Klein.
Thank you, council, for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Tom Klein, and I live at 702 East Street. And I happen to live there with my wonderful wife, who is here today. So she gets annoyed because I give her grief for not recognizing me when she goes out and is in front of people. Like the time that she got an Emmy Award, and I'm sitting there in the audience, and I have I'm ready. And she never mentioned me, so, oh well. Along with most residents who own homes and live on the Point, I am honestly baffled by council's March 10th vote supporting Councilmember Scolati's proposal to impose short-term rentals on the Point community. No public notice, no community engagement, no protection from outside rental investors angling for a foothold inside the Point. And the amendment is simply not needed. The Point already has a rental program, a 30-day rental minimum. It is not broken. It doesn't need fixing. It works. But what is most revealing, to me anyway, is what was cut from the amendment that was voted on. The Planning Commission had recommended a ban on short-term rental properties where the owner does not reside. But that provision was scrapped just before the final presentation, removing the only real barrier to rental businesses and corporations looking to turn homes into very profitable hotels. This requirement would have protected the Point and all the other areas of the city from the damaging effects of short-term rentals. By stripping that regulation, council signaled its willingness to carry the water for outside investors eager to step in and buy up the Point's limited residential inventory. The result? I think we know what the result is. Higher home prices and higher infrastructure and city service costs at the expense of resident property owners. So the question is, why did council members Scolati, Mitchell, and McPhee ignore public interest and involvement, then rush through a vote that serves only the business interests of outside investors? As we wait for an answer, I recommend city staff go back and pursue other options our communities might actually want and appreciate. And there are plenty of options out there, as you've heard earlier. Cities with historic districts across the country, including Savannah, Key West, Nantucket, Nashville, Austin, New Orleans, and Park City. They're all regulating and limiting short-term rentals. Charleston's old historic district has residency and property requirements, kind of similar to what the council struck out of their vote. But these eliminate outside investment in short-term rentals. That was really our only hope, and that was stricken out of the proposal that council voted on March 10th. And Carmel by the Sea in California, by the way, like the Point, keeps it simple by prohibiting rentals of less than 30 days. So though these approaches in these other cities that do have historic districts that they're protecting though they have different approaches, they all share the same goal, and that is to maintain and protect the special character of historic districts. Protecting the point requires an appreciation for its history, culture, and unique charm, the very essence of what draws tourists to Beaufort. You have to spend enough time here to understand just how special it really is. You know, our 30-day minimum rental program offers the chance to do just that. Kelly and I have a number of great friends in the point, and two couples in particular. We came to know them because they were renting under the 30-day minimum program. And guess what? Today, they are resident property owners on the point. So of course, the best solution is also the easiest to make happen. Leave the current ordinance as is, which exempts the point from short-term rentals. I urge all council members to do the right thing, remove the amendment, and support our community by keeping the 30-day minimum rental program in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, next is Dave Russell.
Council, Dave Russell, 411 Craven Street. I'm not going to speak too long because I don't want to repeat what a lot of people have said, but I think one important thing that came out of the last meeting was Councilman Scalati stated that the point couldn't be exempt because it'd be spot zoning. I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of zoning law. Spot zoning is zoning by definition is different areas are treating differently based upon a number of different factors. Spot zoning is when one property or a couple different properties are singled out and given a special treatment. That's exactly what happened with the 6 along Carteret and on North Street. Spot zoning by the city, which, you know, is for another day, but I think is very appalling. The other thing I would say is we already have a tremendous amount of transient lodging. And I'll preface it by saying they're very good neighbors and we have no problem with them. But 607 Bay, Emerald, City Loft, again, the STRs excludes them from all their calculation, but the reality is at any given time, there's 50 open rooms in those entities. So we'll have 50 people already from a transient perspective in our point neighborhood, which is defined by the city as our point neighborhood. Those people will come through the neighborhood. They'll do what they do, and we welcome them. If you take the 6% exemption, the proposed regulation times 200 houses, we're already over that. That's 48. That's basically 48. So we're rooms, and I should say by rooms I mean a room fits 2 people. If you look at the number of rooms we would have with the 6%, we're already over that by the number of rooms available in the transient lodging now. So, you know, 12 houses times four people in each unit, 48. Currently, we're already over that with 50 available rooms in these various transit lodging. So the other thing I would say is affordability. You know, the point is not all privileged people. Some of us have been either lucky in life, earn what we have in life, or whatever walks of life we are. But we have caddies that work at Secession around the corner. They're professional caddies. They live in apartments they rent and houses they rent. Yeah, they would be gone tomorrow if someone bought that building and there was SDRs available. We have, you know, modest retirees. We have retired clergy. So it's not, you know, a bunch of privileged people. We have a diverse neighborhood where STRs could really hamper people. And I think, you know, the key is, as Matt mentioned, we bought into having tourism during the day, a lot of people in the streets going through. What we didn't buy into is having it at night on our neighbors' porches, through our neighbors' windows. So I urge you to look at what we contribute to the city, the amount we already have commercialization in the point compared to other neighborhoods. And I'm not at all minimizing what they go through. And I think, you know, I think STRs in any neighborhood really hurt the residential character. So this is not, you know, they should have it, we shouldn't. But they have commercial activity, and certainly I'll put our commercial activity up against any neighborhood in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, next, Conway Ivy.
I'm Conway Ivy. I live at 501, pardon me, King Street. I want to thank the council for including this issue in this work session. I think that's very, very helpful. Interestingly, in the March 10th City Council meeting, the discussion concerning the proposed ordinance, I did not see one argument in favor in advancing for the benefits of short-term rentals. It was all on how do you mitigate the problems in south short-term rentals. You know, one of the aspects, we spent a lot of time appropriately talking about clustering and, you know, getting too many short-term rentals in a neighborhood. Well, that's an example of an adverse effect. The issue of the points exemption from short-term rentals came out of the blue when Mr. Scolati proposed an amendment to strike paragraph 4, which recognized the points long-term exemption. This exemption, as pointed out earlier by Beth Grace, has been in place since 2018, but importantly, without complaint. Striking this provision from the ordinance was not part of the discussions leading to the proposed ordinance now before council. It is therefore not a critical element to passing this current proposal or its implementation. So I can better understand the council's current position on the removal of this exemption. I ask the question, what has caused the urgency, and I stress urgency, to remove the point short-term rental exemption? I request that each member of council and the mayor answer this question individually, starting with Mr. Scolati. Now, the purpose of this workshop is to have dialogue, so I respectfully request the time for your answers not be deducted from my time. But, and I sincerely ask that question because I think that will help us understand where you're coming from, and it's a spirit of dialogue for this workshop. So I'll start, Mr. Scolati.
You want to, I'd rather answer the question when I have my discussion afterward.
We can do this afterwards. We can have council go down.
I will answer that question now. I promise you I'll come back to that.
Okay. Then the answer that I'm working on is one that was mentioned in the March 10th meeting when this was proposed. And the reason was for removing the point was equity and the quote special privilege of the point were the reasons to not allow the neighborhoods to request exemptions. I think if we allow all neighborhoods to request exemptions from short-term rentals, this would be true equity. Should other neighborhoods out of short-term rentals, appropriate provisions can be made for people that own short-term rentals. Indeed, in the March 10th council meeting, Mr. Mitchell said that the pain of these short-term rentals do not just rest with the residents of the point, but also with other neighborhoods as well, and such as the Northwest Quadrant. Social capital is a term used to describe those assets of a community that are hard to measure but vital for its health and resilience. Examples are relationships among neighbors and the voluntary contributions made by individuals to the betterment of their community. I do not think the impact on social capital has been given adequate consideration in considering this proposed ordinance. At a minimum, council should withdraw its amendment to eliminate the short-term rental exemption of the point. Council should propose allowing other neighborhoods to exempt themselves as well. And more importantly, council should adequately evaluate the potential adverse impacts on social capital. The urgency of this issue before us is not to pass the ordinance. It is to allow more time for careful consideration of all of our residents' viewpoints before allowing for fundamental changes in our community that we all love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, next we have Allison Gilliard.
Guys, thank you. I'll be really brief. As all of you have spoken before me, I'm just going to reiterate what's been said from the Point Neighborhood Association. We did a survey. We sent out a survey to everybody that we had an email for. Almost unanimously, it came back, nobody wants short-term rentals. And I have the results for you. They're live, very much similar to Jean's poll, but nobody wants them in our neighborhood. So I hope that you guys listen to what the neighborhood's saying and realize that we do not want short-term rentals in the Point. And why would we change the exemption that was made in 2018? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've already heard, I've got Tierney Stone again. I know you've already spoken, so I'm going to next go to Sarah Scudder. I know her as Sally.
Councilman, I'm Sarah Scudder, and I reside at 708 Hamilton Street with my husband, Al. Many of you know me as Sally Calhoun. And I've lived here, well, 5 generations of my family have lived at 708 Hamilton Street. So it's near and dear to me. While we were renovating before, my husband is 94 and we had to have a downstairs bedroom. So we bought a home out at Sandy Ridge and it was on the river and had a dock and about 3 times as big as my home at 708. But I still want to go home because nothing is like home. And that is just so emotional and means so much to me that this proposal that has come before the council to further derogate from the privacy, the homeowner's privacy at the Point. We are subject to, and I say subject to, I don't welcome those carriage tours and those hot horses just looking like they're going to die and filled with all these people. And then in addition to that, they then had the bus tours. And I thought, well, that's better. You don't have to listen to the circus barker yelling all these ridiculous tales about the hanging lamp and the stairs to nowhere and all these tales to make the tour interesting. And then in addition to that, they started walking tours and little microphones. And then to exacerbate that, they had the walking tours at night, which was really an invasion of your privacy. One of those leaders of those tours later turned out to be a peeping Tom. So that just tells you what happens with that. When I was there, when I remember growing up there, they had dirt streets. I had 8 uncles and aunts that lived within 2 blocks, 10 cousins. So it was a very tight neighborhood. And a lot of it was my family. But now that more wealthy people have moved in, nobody used to take a vacation more than a week. Now a lot of this is second homes for a lot of people. And that changed the atmosphere of the Point. But at least they own it, they pay taxes, and you don't have additional cars and trucks and things. But it's not only the additional people and the fact that they'll be celebrating and partying into the night. Right behind them comes the cleanup people and their cars and their traffic. The other thing is that it's just the burden is increasing. There are more tours. I was walking the dog and one of those, the buses, the light golf carts. I said hello and then I turned the corner and there was another one. I've been in the middle of an intersection where I saw 4 carriages converging. So I know they have limits on that, but they're not kept. You say we should share the burden that, everybody else has to share. Well, if you're different, you get a reason to be treated differently. We are burdened. We're the biggest tax base there is. We are burdened with an unending line of tourists. And I'm upset about it. I'm angry. I'm disappointed that it's turning into the way it has. And I ask you to vote against it. And I'm definitely opposed to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Next, we have Douglas Stores.
Is this on? Second good afternoon. My name is Douglas Stores. I live at 411 New Street, in the Point. Let's get rid of this thing.
Closer to your mouth.
That gonna work? Can you hear me now? Okay, we'll try that. Does that work? No. No, you sit down. Enjoy yourself.
Okay.
I apologize because I forgot my glasses, but I think I can read my notes. I think what's important here is to recognize that it's not just Oh, you can hear me?
Keep the green light on.
Yeah, green light.
All right, it's like.
You want something else to talk? I mean, I don't have to. Okay, my point is, simple point is that it's not just the residents who are concerned about this ordinance. Obviously, everybody here tonight, if you asked them to raise their hand if they were in favor of it or against it, you would hear virtual 100% of people who are opposed to it. But I think it's important to note that it's not just the residents. And I'm going to tell you things that you probably already know, but the Planning Commission held public hearings, workshops regarding this ordinance, and after their September meeting, voted unanimously to include the language that would prohibit short-term rentals on the Point. It's also important to note Kurt's two memos to you, one on the 3rd and one on the 10th, that included recommendations from a committee of 8 staff members of the city, who also recommended that there be no short-term rentals on the Point. Finally, in chapter 19 and section 7, which was under Exhibit A, the ordinance, it clearly states that there are to be no short-term rentals on the Point. So I guess in summary, I really encourage you to honor the commission's recommendations, honor the city staff's recommendations, as well as honoring the opinions of all of the residents here, and eliminate this option of short-term rentals on the Point. We're doing well on time. Finally, this issue of zoning has gotten to be very confusing to a lot of people. Just because it's allowed in one neighborhood does not mean it should be allowed in all neighborhoods. That's the basis behind zoning, is that one neighborhood can be and should be zoned differently from another. It's interesting to note that the Supreme Court 100 years ago this year affirmed the constitutionality of zoning. So yes, there are different districts. You know, for example, if one district was zoned industrial, it does not mean that all neighborhoods should be allowed to have industrial uses. It's a very basic component of zoning. So, I urge you, listen to residents, listen to your city staff, listen to the commission, and please, as they always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And let the ordinance remain as a 30-day limitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
And last but certainly not least is Edie Rogers. You get to, you're the last one, so you get to have the last word.
I know how.
Yeah,
to
we
have
can't hear
this
you.
Microphone. I wanted to commend all of you. You have volume now, but you also have an echo in it, Mr. City Manager. Anyway, I rushed in at the last minute. I am not prepared with typewritten notes as so many of my colleagues are, but I don't live on the point. I am here as a citizen. I live at Rebo Island, one of those that is exempted through their covenants. But I'm going to put on my glasses. This is my notes. This is the way I operate. Run in at the last minute and jot down some notes. This is not my first time at this rodeo. Mr. McPhee can attest that I was there every time this proposal was made for this ordinance for short-term rentals, speaking out against it. Always saying, don't do this to Beaufort. This is not good for your city. It's not good for the tax-paying citizens. And now I hear all these wonderful research figures that people have come up with, and I hope you're duly impressed. Maybe it was done as a fundraiser for the city. Maybe it was. When you hear the difference between short-term permits, the income from short-term rentals versus long-term. That was a pretty impressive thing. But the major thing is we're not anywhere USA. I don't care what they do in the rest of the country. Maybe I should, but as far as whether or not they allow certain things like social districts and short-term renting, you threw zoning, you did not, you were not the council at that time. The council that adopted this ordinance never should have done it. They threw zoning right out the window when they did it. Residential zoning does not allow commercial of any type. These short-term rentals operate like a motel. And therefore, we could, you've already had to make changes. I hear in the things I read and hear, I hear things that were not there originally, such as how many extra units you can have on the back of the lot or whatever. Anyway, as long as you're within that 6%. Anyway, it is not a good thing. You will be back here again in 3 to 5 years if you don't get rid of the whole ordinance, which would be my suggestion. Just remove it from the books. Just do whatever you have to do to give those people who spent their money time to give the people who have invested in this time to recap a little bit more money. It's done all the time. And then not allow any more short-term rentals. The people on the point are not the only people who are unhappy with this. They are the most organized group. I'll tell you, at the time that it was proposed, I guess maybe they pay more attention to what's going on in their city. They're a more compact neighborhood, perhaps. But at any rate, I sort of secretly thought they outsmarted the council by getting their petition and coming, and I thought, oh, they won't allow it, but they did. So we'll move on from there. Councilman Mitchell, I read a quote that you made in the paper the other day, which was excellent. I've forgotten which issue, maybe it was the paper bag, plastic bag issue. You said schools and institutions should adhere, and I'm paraphrasing, should adhere to the same standards as businesses. I certainly agree with that. Councilman Scalati then stated that public funded entities should set examples. I'm hoping that the public-funded city government will set an example and abolish this ordinance, or you'll be back here soon with more grief to amend it to for something else. Please don't do this to Beaufort. Thank you.
Is there anyone else online or otherwise?
Yeah, we have a gentleman online, Graham.
Okay, I'll get to you next, Rob. Okay, have Mr. Trask online.
He is, sir.
Hi, Graham Trask, 1211 Bay Street, the Bluff neighborhood, which is part of T4HN, just like the Point neighborhood, which is T4HN. I've been watching and listening to all the eloquent speeches from the Point residents. I'm going to chastise them a little bit. I wish they would be so engaged in issues which impact our fair city and the livability of our fair city, but don't necessarily directly and ostensibly impact the Point. All the issues, and I wish you'd come out in droves to stand up for the livability of our city rather than just the livability of the Point. All the issues that the Point residents have so eloquently articulated occur in all our neighborhoods, as Mrs. Rogers said. Why did the Point expect exceptionalism? Exempting a neighborhood for exempting a neighborhood which is a portion of the T4HN is in fact spot zoning. It's legally indefensible and it will be challenged. The Bluff has the highest concentration of Beaufort's largest and most historic homes. The issues which Dr. Grace and others highlighted are destroying the Bluff, which, because it includes STRs and in fact bed and breakfasts. What is so unique about the Point that doesn't apply to the Bluff or other neighborhoods for that matter? We need to ban STRs in the T4HN totally, not just on the Point. Or potentially a compromise is we could reduce the caps to such a level that it allows effectively no STRs. Exempting the Point is not tenable when you have the Bluff and other very historic neighborhoods which feel the same pressure, if that means anything, that the Point feels. So unless T4HN bans as a zoning class STRs, the Point cannot be exempted from STRs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Anyone else? Rob Cahill? Give us your name and address, Rob.
Rob Cahill, 608 Water Street, a city walk. Prompted not to speak because as a resident of City Walk, bought property 10 years ago. Actually, quick little notes here. 2016, I'll kind of talk around here. I was going with my wife from Savannah to Charleston, and during the interim time, because we couldn't check, we had to check out at 10, arrive at 3 o'clock, stop by Beaufort. Now, I had not even heard of Beaufort. I think I may be the only person in the world that not heard of Beaufort. So what do? We stopped at a real estate office. Looked at City Walk, walked over to City Walk. Within an hour, within 60 minutes, I had a handshake and I bought a piece of property. My former wife said, but Rob, we haven't even talked about where we want to live. Well, the Holy Spirit spoke, I listened, handshake. And then I read the CCRs. that prohibited, as mentioned earlier, STRs or whatever they called them then. I was initially disappointed because that was going to be an income source, an income stream. But then I said, why? Why? Because we want to build a community. Bingo. He's a gentleman, you spoke about quality of life and community. Bingo, that just hit just like, yes, this is where I want to be. 6 months later, I bought another piece of property. Like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah, we did. Now I built a house and moved in 2020. I say this because testimony to why I made the best decision. I told my kids, I'm going out here in a box. I found it. I'm going to be here through thick, through thin, because look at this room. I've been coming to these meetings for 3 years. There's more people here than combined in 3 years. So I'm going to patronize you. I'm not running for council in November, but give yourself some applause. Graham, I have a different way of looking at that. If the strategy in your council was to get people to come to your meetings, I don't think it was. Look at this, the talent, the treasure evident here. All these people in their own voice make the same point, and that's going to lead to my final point. Well, I got 2.5 minutes. So recommendation. I think every problem or opportunity or challenge that has been solved in a small town, I still call Beaufort a small town, beautiful Beaufort by the Bay, has been solved somewhere, somehow. We do not need to recreate the wheel. I would encourage you to direct Scott Marshall and the staff to research all those communities that had STR policies with specific emphasis on those that realized what a bad idea it was and changed and reversed them. That is a database that's factual. It's not passionate as it may be. I'll bet that's evident. I bet you cannot find anybody that had an STR that got challenged that still has one. I don't know that. I'm happy to put that up to the test of the data that it provides. You have heard reason after reason after reason. I defy anybody to defend why you would have one. Why would you have one? Why would you risk turning beautiful Beaufort by the Bay into maybe? For whose benefit? Nobody sitting in this room. Nobody sitting in this room. And you all, everyone that I've talked to since I moved here has the best interests of Beaufort at heart, or so they say. My whole consulting practice has been about espouse versus actual values. So let's make this an actual value. I'm gonna leave time on the board and find ways to rescind whatever came up. Josh, I have an admiration for you, and I'm sure you did it with good intent, with good heart. But I think if you're listening like everybody else, there is not one reason you can say, I'm going to defend the amendment that was proposed earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Does anyone else wish to speak? Going once?
We do have one, sorry. Josh
Zoom?
Gibson on Zoom.
Who is it, Sean?
Josh Gibson.
Okay. Josh, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. So the question that I have that was unclear to me from reading the ordinance as it's drafted, if there, with the distance between the separate neighborhoods, with the distances between short-term rentals, there are areas like Carteret Street and Charles Street where you can have a short-term rental because of the zoning of the piece of property itself. And you can't have another short-term rental within 300 feet of another short-term rental. Are those included in those measurements, or is it only the ones that are asking for the ones in residential zoning? So which is to say, can only one from residential zoning be 300 feet from another one from residential zoning, but right next to one? Because in the neighborhood where I live, it's only 3 blocks wide. So the actions of the people on the perimeter of the neighborhood would have an impact on the ones inside it and vice versa.
Well, I'm gonna let Kurt answer that, but I would tell you that right now, all those that are currently in place are grandfathered.
No, I understand that the ones that are grandfathered, but going forward, would the 300 feet limit, 300-foot limit apply to the ones only that are zoned residential already, or would it apply to the ones that are zoned? If one that's mixed use is within 300 feet of somebody who's applying for one, if they're under the 6% cap, would they be able to get one, or would that count, or would that 300 feet exempt or count against them from not being able to have one?
The zoning, we're taking it out of the zoning ordinance, so it's 300 feet from any short-term rental, including a now grandfathered
Mixed use or
short-term rental.
commercial.
So doesn't matter if it's commercial, doesn't matter if it's mixed use, doesn't matter if it's residential. If it's a short-term rental, 300 feet away.
So that kind of answers the question that kind of leads to is my idea that the city has created these neighborhoods as distinct for a reason, to serve a purpose so that they are treated differently from each other. Mossy Oaks is not treated the same necessarily as the Point, and the Northwest Quadrant is not the same as the Glebe or the Old Commons or Pinch Point or these other areas as well. We've created these different areas because they are used differently and have different specifications about what's required for setbacks and stuff like that. It seems to me that any approach to looking at the short-term rental things needs to be done on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis because they are so different from each other. Otherwise, I don't understand why the city has taken the time to differentiate them and come up with a universal language that applies to all of them if they are separate and distinct areas that have different needs and different uses. And I would hope that you would take that into consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice? Okay, do we want to go ahead and answer the question that was posed earlier by Conway Ivy? Josh, you want to?
And yeah, you just want to answer that question and you can get on to the rest of the comments, or?
Well, you can have as many comments as you want. I mean, address whatever you want to address about short-term rental.
Okay, you want me to start? All right. First, I will just say that I have always, since I've been on council at least, been very impressed. Yeah, it's on. Is it not? Okay. Sorry about that. So I've always been impressed with, since I've been on council at least, the Points neighborhood ability to coordinate and influence policy through these efforts right here. So I want to thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for all of the emails that we did receive, and for those that reached out. I only had one call me and say, I really would like to understand your perspective and the reason behind why you made the or advanced the motion to amend the language. And that stood out to me because it was not just necessarily one-way communication, but it was trying to understand what my thought process was, as well as providing their perspective, which was in opposition to the motion. But I just wanted to note that because there was only one who did reach out via phone call. I'm sorry?
Two questions.
Right, yeah, and that's tonight. So, and just to answer that question, since I'm on there right now, the reason is because, just to provide some context, when I first got elected, there was a neighbor who reached out and she lived in the Northwest Quadrant. And she was expressing grave concern over the fact that the neighborhood had become overwhelmed with short-term rentals. And she had a packet of information and all of the percentages and the details. So I read through it, and at the time, Mayor Murray was still our mayor. And I expressed some concern to him, and I was like, I'd like to bring this up and talk about it in a work session. Reason is because there's an exemption in T4N, and they are exempt from the 6% cap, and that has by default created an environment in some of these neighborhoods that's changed the character of the neighborhood, and these are historic neighborhoods. That evolved not just because of that, but also there's other members on this council that are concerned with short-term rentals. And so it was expressed that there was interest to really do two things, and that was close the exemption for T4N and factor in a 300-foot spacing requirement. And I think that would have solved 99% of our problems that we were having with short-term rentals and neighborhoods being overwhelmed with short-term rentals. What that evolved into is a complete rewrite of the short-term rental ordinance, which was through our planning commission. Mr. Klein, you mentioned that there was no public notice of this. I would just state that for the record, all of these meetings that the planning commission held were publicly noticed. Our work sessions in which we discussed it were publicly noticed. Our meeting just the other day, March 10th, was publicly noticed. But the urgency, there's no real urgency to strike the prohibiting language, but I've told myself since the beginning that I likely would not have voted in favor of providing a special exception for the point, because I feel like as policymakers that represent an entire city, it is our job to pass fair and flat policies that's in the best interest of the entire city. And I feel like it was a mistake for the city to allow for an exemption to the 6% cap for the Northwest Quadrant and Old Commons neighborhood, others as well. But I also feel like it was a mistake to put in language that was prohibiting short-term rentals at all in the Point neighborhood. So I say that just to answer the question with there's no urgency necessarily to strike that, but when the entire ordinance was rewritten, it came before us. So then I was faced with the decision of either passing it or bringing it up for discussion to strike that language. And if I would have passed it without even bringing it up for discussion, it would have been the same as passing it in 2017 in my mind. And so for me, the opportunity existed. Can I come back to it so I don't lose my thought? But I wouldn't have passed it then. And so I wasn't in favor of passing it now without at least bringing it up for discussion. And then there was support, obviously, and others had felt the same, that there was potentially privilege provided to a neighborhood where other neighborhoods did not have that same opportunity. And currently, we have no mechanism by which other neighborhoods can do that. There's no mechanism by which Mossy Oaks or any other neighborhood can come to the city and say, hey, we'd like to be exempt. Instead, what has happened is in some of these neighborhoods, they have been overwhelmed and the character of the neighborhood has changed. And so while I appreciate, is that not true? It is true. That's right.
Justify you taking it away.
So no. So let me
All right,
finish
let him finish, please.
let me finish my thought here.
Let's be civil and respectful. Let him finish.
So I say this because I think the best course of action for the city would have been to do exactly what was originally directed, and that's to close the exemption in T4N and factor in a 300-foot distance requirement. But now that we're here and we have this in front of us, I think that it is appropriate to strike the language. I have a list of notes that I've taken. I've heard every comment. I've read every email. I understand that not because I live in the neighborhood, but just because I have spoken to many of the neighbors, that the neighborhood is impacted by tours and narrow streets and limited parking. And I think all of those are notable concerns. However, I don't think that we should base our decisions on short-term rental policy on those things. If tours were impacting or other issues were impacting the neighborhood, I think that those should be handled separately and not built into and rolled into how we regulate short-term rentals. Unfortunately, I do also believe that most of the comments and the discussions that has been had are centered around a misunderstanding, because there's the illusion that this council is, or some members on this council are advocating for short-term rentals. That is the exact opposite of what this council is advocating for, and has ever since we've had this discussion for several years now, which has been to better regulate and then reduce the amount of short-term rentals. So I was actually caught off guard when we received our packet, which stated that the percentage count was going to be based on dwelling units, which was defined as individual rooms, when previously it was defined as residential lots, I would actually say that it could be based on lots in general. And then however we can bring that 6% number down and reduce the amount of short-term rentals that exist, I think that we would be better for it, including a 6% cap in the point. There's been comments made about increasing the short-term rental count. Ms. Russell, you had a comment, and if I heard you right, you said that it would potentially increase the short-term rentals by 60%, and overall, and that the way that it was written before we made the amendment to base it off of residential lots, not dwelling units.
Notice for this hearing talks about dwelling units. The letter that was sent on your packet for this work session says dwelling units.
Right.
It's only when you look at the regulation that it says residential lots, and it refers to the map of the city. I don't have any definition of what that means. Does it mean where one residence, that's what I said, if I have a double lot, does that mean 2 lots? Is it an open lot space considered a residential lot because it's in a residential neighborhood? Without a definition, I don't think you can properly proceed to do anything with this if you're going to base it on residential.
Right. And so I absolutely agree with you that I think that some of that needs to be cleaned up. But the point I'm making is this council never intended for the language to read that it was going to be based on dwelling units, because that would double or triple the amount of short-term rentals that were allowed. And that is the exact opposite of what this council was intending to accomplish. So that's why I said I was caught off guard when that came before us. Can I ask this one question?
It on the 300-foot, when they did the chart of the 300 and what they were doing it, and to see the densities and what was allowed and what wasn't, there's a specific chart that showed how many would be allowed per neighborhood and what currently existed. And I counted what was currently existed, what would be allowed, and what was pending, and that's where the difference is. If you conclude is it's pending, a different figure. The lowest figure is 62%, which included the lowest number of everything, and including all the currently existing and the pending as your current amount, and then looking at what was possible for every neighborhood given the differential, and that's where the lowest came up, which was, not including the point, 62%.
Okay. And so again, I think that in the definitions, there does need to be clarification as to what's being talked about. But one thing that we know is the appropriate answer is not dwelling units, because that would double and triple the amount of short-term rentals. Another comment that was made, and this is the question, one of the questions that I wanted to ask, just by a show of hands, how many in here knew that there was 6 operating short-term rentals prior to March 10th? How many in here, just by a show of hands, knew that there were 6 short-term rentals operating in the point prior to our meeting in November or March 10th? Yeah.
I didn't know.
Fine. Yeah. So that's the question to you guys. Please, so how many knew? Yes, can I just get a show of hands of how many knew that was?
And then you can ask it if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. In this ordinance, you describe, or staff describes the point as Carteret East, but that includes frontage that is core commercial and office commercial on Carteret. So in my understanding over the last 40 years, and I was on county council for 10 years, office commercial and core commercial, their basic zoning allows them to have other uses, not T4N, or what would be called a neighborhood would be residential. So that's where a lot of this confusion is. When that came out and you said that we had 6, we went bonkers. Where are the 6? Who in our neighborhood is operating them? It's not in our neighborhood per se. It's in the office commercial and core commercial. So that's just my point.
Okay, right. And when I look at the map, I see the point, and I see the point has basically 2 zoning districts inside of it, T4N, T4HN, mostly your T4HN, but your short-term rentals are operating in that T4N section because you have an exemption to the cap entirely for T4N, and then you have a prohibition in the neighborhood altogether for short-term rentals. Those two conflicting things have allowed the 6 that exist.
The definition says what Beth was saying, Carteret. And if you exempt the point, which you did, then that exempted, it should be exempt under that definition.
And I guess that's the underlying
But what
problem
I
of
would say is-
inconsistent policy. But the question that I asked was, how many in here knew that there was 6 that were operating in the definition of the point prior to our March 10th? No, I'm not saying you knew. I'm just asking the question to see who knew. Okay.
Okay, one person at a time.
Okay, question's unfair. Got it.
Okay.
With all of my neighbors, and all of my neighbors said, Councilor Scalati has it wrong. There are no short-term rentals to the point, and if there are, the city has failed to enforce against. That is what the universal understanding. That was to say there were 6. Everybody was surprised and thought they had it wrong. That's where we started.
Right. And I didn't. And I'll tell you this, before our March 10th meeting, I didn't realize that either. And the only reason that I knew that by the time that I responded to you was because when I left, I pulled up our short-term rental map on our GIS portal. And then I was able to see that there was 6 that were operating. That was further confirmed with a phone call to staff, but I didn't know that either. I was operating under the fundamental belief that I feel like our policies should be the same across the board. If individual neighborhoods decide to regulate themselves different, then we have that case and HOAs can be created. But I wasn't making the decision because I knew that there was short-term rentals that existed. I do know that based on the count of lots, my understanding is that there would be no more than 12 allowed if there was a 6% cap. You currently have 6. So essentially you would be able to have 6 more and no more.
Okay, Ms. Stone had her hand up. If you want to come to the podium so we can. Okay. You need to go to the podium because nobody can hear and we got to record this.
My question is, in response to that letter, you said we wouldn't feel anything. We had 6. We'd only, there may be no more or at most 4. So I'm just trying to figure out where the difference is from 0 to 4 to 6, because I don't have that.
Well, I don't remember saying 0 to 4. I think I remember saying 6 to 10, which I would have been 6 to 10 total. But that's because I'm learning as I go too, right? I didn't know that you had 6 operating and I didn't know the exact count. So I didn't know how many would be allowed if there was a 6% cap. I knew I could get close, but didn't know exactly. And through phone calls, I was able to confirm what that would be. But at the time that I emailed you, I didn't have that knowledge.
Can you all come up to the podium to speak? Ginger, you're.
Okay.
We might be here all night, folks, so.
I hope not.
Yeah, Ginger.
Okay, I just want to say that 100 years ago, my mother-in-law was born on the Point. And she always said that the Point was east of East Street. If you look at a map, that's the part that sticks out. So who would have thought that the commercial part of Carteret Street, that's east, on the east side of Carteret, would be considered the Point? It's core commercial over there. That's where you need your short-term rentals, on the core commercial. You have a motel there. That's what that's for, not the neighborhood.
Matt?
Josh, you said you're learning, and I think what we're all learning, what it seems to me that you all have learned in this exercise is that short-term rentals appear to be a problem for you as it relates to neighborhoods just like ours, but who did not have the ability to front load or were cohesive enough to get together to say, hey, we don't want this. I think it's rather interesting that the neighborhoods in which the STRs primarily exist are those that were not developed with a property, a developer, a property owners association. It seems to be that the vast majority of those that are planned have seen the wisdom in eliminating STRs, from Islands of Beaufort, City Walk. And so it's as if we're backfilling this. This is a problem of being preyed upon by not being the city at large. And you have these problems. It's as if we have fire in this neighborhood with STRs, fire in that neighborhood with STRs. And the solution is to put a fire in our neighborhood. And that just doesn't make any sense. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't change anything with the caps in the other neighborhoods. It does nothing to alleviate their problems.
When I look at the issues and the complaints that we've had, and I can't speak for everybody up here, it is solely coming from the neighborhoods that were exempt from the 6% cap, because they're up to 20% of some of the lots being used as short-term rentals. And so those are the issues. And that's why I think that 99% of our problems would have been resolved just in closing that exemption and building in a 300-foot requirement. This is not about relieving the pressure in other neighborhoods by opening up in the point at all. This is more so about passing policy that is consistent across the board. And what it would do is it would naturally, in time, reduce the amount of short-term rentals, because all of those neighborhoods that are currently exceeding the 6% would eventually fall off and become down to that number. So it would grossly reduce the amount of short-term rental licenses, so it would still serve the purpose of the original intent to do just that.
But you're potentially hollowing out the neighborhood that is the engine of the tourism car that we drive. And you are willing to do that for what you call good policy?
Well, we're obviously seeing it a little bit different, but let me just close. Because I want to get to my comment. If we just keep going backward, I don't think this is the best venue for this. I would say this. I hope that even with this conversation in front of us, that the invite still stands for the community social that you guys would have. My intent is to attend, and I would be willing to have further conversation as much as needed to understand this and what can be done. But what I want to say is Mr. Trask made a comment that perhaps a compromise would be to prohibit short-term rentals in T4HN entirely. And had that been something that was proposed, that's not something that I would have objected to, because again, I'm not up here advocating for short-term rentals. Do I think that they serve a valuable purpose? Yes. Do I think that there are opportunities to where it creates additional revenue streams for families and creates a more affordable option for them? Yes. But I also see much value in them being regulated because of the damages that could come if neighborhoods are oversaturated with short-term rentals. And I'll also throw this out there just in case there's not the appetite to prohibit short-term rentals in the entire zoning class of T4HN. Is another potential compromise that could come from this is leaving the short-term rental prohibition as it is in the point for a period of time, 6 months, and then that would give the neighborhood the time to stand up in HOA that could self-regulate that. I'm not sure what the objection is to doing so with other neighborhoods that have done that. I'm not necessarily a proponent of HOAs, but as a city government, I think that we should pass policies with the entire city in mind and not do it by specific neighborhoods. But I do think that neighborhoods could have the opportunity to govern themselves. So those are two things that I would say that potentially provides an avenue for the point to keep the prohibition in place.
Members of council, I think you're making this far too complicated. I agree that other neighborhoods are adversely impacted because of short-term rentals. Even Mr. Mitchell said that of the Northwest Quadrant and other neighborhoods. One simple way to do it, which I mentioned, is give the other neighbors the option to opt out. You can take care of the current short-term rentals in terms of so those people are not harmed. That really gives the decision to the neighborhoods. It's also, you mentioned, they don't have a mechanism for doing that. The council creates mechanisms all the time. We're looking at a proposal of a mechanism here. You can make an ordinance that would allow neighbors to opt out if there's a significant enough percentages. And so that could simplify a lot of things. I do want to come back, and I am looking for, you answered my question. I thank you for that. I would like the other members of council and the mayor, and I'll repeat the questions. What has caused the urgency, and I stress urgency, to remove the point short-term rental exemption? And frankly, I don't want to leave here tonight unless I have an answer from each one of you individually. And I think as a dedicated resident and lover of this community, I deserve that answer. Thank you.
Go next. Do you want us to go ahead and go through?
I give you a brief answer.
It would be very brief. We'll do this.
I'll be real brief. I mean, first of all, I don't mean to refer to y'all as worms, but I feel like a can of worms was opened up when this was proposed. It was, I feel, unnecessary, that we had a good balance and there was everything was going good for that area. I am again saying I am against removing the prohibition, and I will not change my mind on that.
I voted no as well, and to Conway's question, the urgency, there is no urgency to remove it. I was opposed to it, I voted against it. I have other issues. I've never been a big fan of STRs, and if you're gonna have them, and we do have some, I'd rather they be owner occupied. I'm not a big fan of investor. Charleston, as a matter of fact, has banned whole house rentals in their whole residential, any residential zone. Not only that, the residential STRs must be owner occupied and the owner living there on site when they do that. But we have a lot of them now. The whole purpose of what we're trying to do is to get a handle on, I mean, you heard tonight, 42% growth in 3 years. Give you a point of reference. Beaufort has 14,600 people. We're 24 square miles. Town of Mount Pleasant, 100,000 people, 50 square miles. They cap all their STRs at 400, period. And that's not, that's in their residential areas, period. But they're so spread out, it's not a big deal. We got a problem where they've clustered. And that's what we're trying to address, because there are pockets, every STR wants to be in the historic section, almost all of them. And that's the problem.
Every STR
Wants to be in the historic district. If you look at STRs, most of them are in historic districts. That's why you see these ones that we've been given, all of these cities are big tourist places. That's why that's happening. And I'm just not a big fan. I call it neighborless neighborhoods. That's one of the problems, neighborhood stability. You want people living in your community that are going to contribute to the community. These people don't. They come and go.
So the original motivation for changing the ordinance at all had to do with the fact that Lee Sunderland and I walked sections of Scott Street about 4 years ago, And Cynthia, with Weakening Hip, joined us for part of it to talk about the proliferation of rentals that were coming up in the core commercial districts, the zoning that were exempt from the 6% cap. That is why the Carteret properties became short-term rentals, because they were exempt from the 6% cap throughout the city. Whether the definition, when I grew up on the point was from the middle of New Street back. If you lived on the Carteret Street and New Street, you didn't live in the Point. Sorry for you of those that live there. So that definition became part of a GIS mapping, just from the standpoint of clumping an area that included the core commercial within those sections. I voted on Tuesday for the discussion of the short-term rentals. I wanted the rest of the amendments to be considered that we had worked an hour and 40 minutes on for that evening, and that was the only reason. I will not vote for them to be continued as far as the band is concerned at our next reading, which will likely not be our second reading, because I think we've gotten indications from the attorneys that this is enough of a changeover that any perception of this would have to go back to a first reading. So we will have more opportunity, but I please don't repeat everything you said tonight at the next meeting. I have 17 pages of notes. I promise you. I'm very good about
And
taking
we still have
notes,
an agenda to get through tonight, so.
but that's my reason.
So good evening, everyone. I applaud your genuine enthusiasm for not having short-term rentals on the Point. So I was one that voted to remove that exemption. And while I hear all of your concerns tonight, I think what I have gained from that is maybe we need to go back and reconsider some things. I'm not sure that I'm at the point where I feel you should be exempted. However, what I hear from the rest of the areas like Northwest Quadrant is, why are you guys special? I said, I don't know that they consider themselves special, but they have a very treasured neighborhood, and either they have the time and the means or the passion to come out and sit like in these seats as you have, where some for other reasons can't be here tonight. I have yet to talk to any neighbor in any neighborhood who is in favor of short-term rentals. Okay? Yes. So you're not unique in that respect. To Mr. Grace's comment, he shared something with me that I hadn't really thought about, but maybe an answer is to ban investment short-term rentals citywide, period. Right? Maybe the answer is that we grandfather everyone that has short-term rentals now, and we ban short-term rentals in the city, period. I don't know the answer, and I'm stressed here sitting on this dais trying to figure out what the right things to do. But I will tell you, Mr. Ivy, what drove my decision is I am really very much aware that I was elected at large. At large. I am pretty confident I got quite a few votes from many of you sitting in here. And I thank you for that. But every decision I make, I'm thinking what's at large and what's, the city at large, and what's fair, okay? We don't want to have a city where there's a special people over here, and the person online that made the comment that each neighborhood was designed, and laid out for a special reason. I can tell you that the folks who sit in the Northwest Quadrant, they feel they were put there for a special reason too, and it's not one that you would find complimentary for the city of Beaufort. So I speak for those people. And I will tell you, just because of the mere fact that I sit here as an African-American, many of those people speak to me that won't speak to these guys. And that's a societal thing that hopefully one day we'll get past. But at the same time, I do feel an obligation to share their voice, okay? So I will say that I think it would be a good thing if we were to totally ban investment short-term rentals. Because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, if you live there, you're probably not going to put up with a lot of stuff as if you're off in some other state. And I think it would solve some of the problems. But there is a sense among many in the other neighborhoods, and I say in other neighborhoods because I talked to a lot of the folks in Old Commons and Northwest Quadrant, that why are they so special? And I said, you know, I don't, you know, folks I know, they don't think of themselves special. Maybe everybody in their neighborhoods feels special. And I suspect that if we were to talk to the folks at the neighborhood association meeting coming up, I think it's this Thursday, in the Northwest Quadrant, I think they're having combined with Old Commons, they'll say, we don't want short-term rentals here either. And just to remind you,
Yeah.
and I think, and other council members can correct me, or Scott or Kurt, that this whole short-term rental thing came up because of the problems that were being experienced in primarily Northwest Quadrant and the feeling of being gentrified. And, you know, I talked to one lady this morning. She has an STR on each side of her and one across the street, right? So I don't know the answer, but I certainly think before we go forward with any kind of decision that there needs to be more discussion, because I don't know the answer, but I don't think, I personally, at this time, I underscore at this time, I don't think the answer is to say, the point you're exempt. Because I think we can use your arguments here for the benefit of other neighborhoods and for the benefit of the entire city. So thank you very much for listening.
I want to thank all of you individually for answering my question. And I think with your responses, it's done a lot to advance the discussion that needs to happen and the study, which is the Beaufort way of doing things. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be extremely brief. Josh, your invitation still stands, and we hope you'll come to our party. Mike and Mitch, thank you for listening hard and for the flexibility you're showing. And for all of the council members, I just would advise you, if you want to proceed on this issue, to slow down a bit. It's so clear that we don't even know some of the basic facts, where we have a lot of smart people in this room. We can't agree even on the numerator and the denominator as to how 6% might apply. You know, there's more work to be done, because once we act, we can't retract. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeff Hamrick again. Mayor, I apologize for blurting out from my seat. I'm glad for the opportunity. You know, I hopped up here because I was, you know, a little bit confused, but listening to your answers, everyone, the councilman, I appreciate, you know, what you've said. I will encourage you, Councilman, you said you were looking out for a constituent who had told you how horrific STRs were in her neighborhood. And Councilman, you had said something similar in the Northwest Quadrant. And I didn't know there were a problem elsewhere. I did research and I realized there are a problem everywhere, but I didn't know there were a problem. What I'll ask you to do is, please don't level the playing field down to the lowest common denominator. If it's a problem, fix the problem where it is. It's not a problem in a point. So don't, under the guise of being uniform, create a problem elsewhere. It's going to be harder to fix in the future. We're exempt. Nothing needs to happen. It won't be a problem in the point if you leave it alone. So you realize it's a problem, and you seem like smart people. Fix it where the problems are. Don't create a problem where there's not a problem. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, council members and community. My name is Jared Madison. I actually live in Mossy Oaks, 2618 Holmes Drive. And excuse my ignorance, but it seems that short-term rentals are a problem for every neighborhood. So is there any ordinance that council can pass that just bans them altogether throughout Beaufort? And So I was going to talk, but I'm gonna just hit a couple points that I had in the speech that I written. So our comprehensive plan clearly states that affordable housing and workforce retention are priorities. But expanding short-term rentals reduces long-term housing supply and drives up cost. We cannot say one thing in our plan and do another thing in practice. We're increasing demand for Beaufort through tourism and short-term rentals while acknowledging that affordability is a growing issue. Those two directions are fundamentally in conflict, and that conflict requires direct attention. So there's an impact on retaining young people. Entry-level housing is crucial. STRs remove that supply. Rising costs impacts younger residents. Young workforce are forced to relocate, and that's in direct contradiction to the long-term sustainability of Beaufort. There is a real-world precedent that may take place here, and Beaufort may become a destination-only problem. So if we continue increasing tourism demand without protecting housing supply, Beaufort risks becoming a place where people visit but cannot live. This shift happens gradually until local residents are priced out. So the greatest threat to Beaufort's character is not change. It is a slow removal of the people who make it what it is.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll be very brief too. I wanted to address Mr. Scalati and Mr. Trask. There's nothing special about this group here. Any neighborhood could organize and come before council. We did this outside our association. We did that for the drain. We were called the Drain Gang, and Dave Russell called us the Pain Gang now.
Thank you. I'm still Rob Cahill. 608 Water Street. Mitch, in part, I'll bet numerous people will probably have read the book Tuesdays with Maury. Mitch Albaum. And what he learned, the point that I want to bring into here now, is that he thought he was his favorite student. Turned out he learned that everybody thought they were his favorite student. So when we talk about this elitism or special, I hope every neighborhood in Beaufort feels they're special. That's a compliment, not a criticism. Related, I'm in school 100 years ago, and I'm in grad school, and I had a different way to get an answer to a problem. And I came and challenged the professor that I should get full credit for this. And he said, no, I can't give that to you. You got the right answer. I didn't think of it that way. And I said, how come? Tell me how come. He said, because then I'd have to go back and grade all the papers. I said, I'm not buying, I said it less politely than I am now. Tell me again. I said, wait, every student had the opportunity like me to challenge it because they were confident they had the right answer, different than you thought. So they all had the opportunity to come in and challenge it. So I really take issue with somebody criticizing this group of people that come before you, and nobody asked for special treatment. They mobilized, they got their voice, and I think that's the bar you want to set. Every neighborhood in Beaufort can come here to this meeting. Prepare, come with a voice. This is the closest I've heard to a single voice since I've been here for almost 10 years. And I really do appreciate you listening. This is like small town democracy at work. Thank you.
Hi, Dave Russell, 411 Craven again. I just want to go back to something Mr. Scalati said. The point exemption was not in, it was discussed at the planning board, basically definitively. I think the quote was, if they want, if the point wants their exemption lifted, they should come to us. No recommendation to the planning board. No workshops where eliminating the point exemption was discussed. So there was public discussion on amending the ordinance on short-term rentals, but not on this point. And then last Tuesday, I guess it's brought up. To my knowledge, there was no staff preparation, no staff materials on it. And right away, it was those people on the point, they're privileged. They should have, just quoting, the share the pain. And not even knowing there are 6 already that I believe are illegal. And there was no, and it came out through discussions and research. And, Mr. Scalati saying he's learning on the run too. I think he would have, given this crowd here, he should have or should have known it would cause a very large mobilization by our neighborhood, and people would have a lot of comments and would want to show up. So the fact that it was brought up out of nowhere was, in my opinion, not good, transparent government. And I hope in the future, this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Hi, one last thing to say, Nancy Russell, 411 Craven Street. People have brought up not to be acting quickly because if you haven't learned, if you should have learned from this situation, you end up grandfathering in the problems you create. So let's not create problems that get grandfathered in from this point on. Let's get it right. And know at the last workshop in November, it was talked about doing a moratorium. And that's something I think you should reconsider and review so that this can be done properly. Thank you.
This is Karen Schwartzman at 316 Hancock Street. I want to address something that you, Councilor Mitchell, said about your representation of the whole city. And I really hearken to what Matt McElhaney talked about as the point being the museum for the city and the economic engine in tourism for the city. I hope you're in a position now, after hearing from everybody, that you feel comfortable that you can actually explain to the rest of your constituents, and I voted for you, I'm one of them who voted for you, but I hope you can explain to all of those who voted for you in the Northwest Quadrant and everyone where else, what it is about the point that really has nothing to do with its residents. It's not about its residents. It's about it being the museum of the city and the economic engine of tourism. I really hope you heard what Matt said, because to me, that's what we're trying to protect. This is not about protecting my house. I'm not worried that the people around me are going to try to get a short-term rental. I don't think, maybe some of these people are, but mostly we're trying to protect something that really is the gem of Beaufort. And everyone in the city should care about that. So I don't have to repeat about let's fix the problem where it lies, but let's not wreck the gem, not for these people, but for all people in Beaufort. That's my point.
Gloria Kurz, 314 Lawrence Street. I'm going to just go to the lowest common denominator here. The issue really isn't the point or the exemption in the point. The issue is the failure of the city to control short-term rentals in general. And the fix isn't pointing fingers or pulling exemptions. The fix is you've got a really serious problem. You've allowed short-term rentals to get up to what, 20% is what I'm hearing in certain areas. The percentages that you're talking about in terms of reducing rates are arbitrary. There is nothing that should prohibit the city, if it chooses, from totally limiting short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods, forcing them, if you will, into commercial or limited commercial with special use permits, and addressing the issue without looking at grandfathering, without looking at how many years does it take to get to a 6% cap, which I don't know who came up with that number and why 6% was even looked at, and start looking at the models like Charleston. Look at Newport, Rhode Island, who also went to in 2022, and they are an area historically that has probably one of the highest volume of short-term rentals I have ever seen. They went to no short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods unless they were owner occupied, so similar to the Charleston model, and limited commercial with special use permits, or commercial like our court commercial on Carteret Street and other areas. And I think that that is the focus, because the issue isn't the exemption and the point. The issue is the failure of the city to have regulated to begin with. So fix the problem. It's not the point.
Okay, we have one other person, I think, is Mr. Trask still online?
Yes, sir, he is.
Okay.
Hey,
Graham, it's all yours.
Graham, thanks, Phil. Graham Trask, 1211 Bay Street. I applaud the last speaker who sees this as a Beaufort issue and not a point issue, which was my point, pun intended, during my first comment, which is that the STRs are the problem, and the STRs need to be addressed citywide. And this isn't just a discussion about the point opting out. The point for the point residents information makes up about 50% of the T4HN district. I have a question for Ben, if I might. Phil, will you allow me?
I guess so. Go ahead. Is that okay with you, Ben? Yeah, okay.
Off the record, Ben, if a certain portion of a zoning classification decided that they wanted to have a different laws than the rest of the zoning classification, would that be illegal? In respect to land use?
Okay. He's heard it. He's not going to give a response, but he's heard it.
So, okay, so he's not going to opine. Well, I think it is illegal. So I think that my suggestion actually for the point is to look at it as a citywide issue, which the last speaker did. And it seems to me that you'd have unanimous approval at the city council level. And I do want to applaud Councilor Scaletti and Councilor Mitchell for standing up for the city and the issue in the city, rather than just an issue in one neighborhood, which is only a part of one zoning classification. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Ben is our city attorney. Ben Coppage. Well, this is really just for public input. It's comment. It's not an interrogatory. We're not supposed to be going back and forth.
But he said that he wouldn't opine, so he made no comment.
A no comment is a comment. Okay. Well, with that, we have to move on. This will be discussed and looks like because of all the changes, it's going to have to go back to another first reading regardless of what we come up with, but stay tuned. Thank you. Thank
See
all
you
of
all
you
in a
for
couple of
showing up.
days.
Appreciate it. What's up, Al? Good to see you. I wish I could say it was wonderful.
Specifically today.
Okay, next. When the crowd, should we take a 5-minute break or y'all want to move on? Wait, we're going to recess for about 5 minutes so council can get some water and do whatever. So we're coming back to go on to Southside Park. So if you want to stick around for that. program, and next on the agenda is Southside Park Phase 2 and Parks and Tourism Revenue Bond reallocation discussion. Alan, you want to fill everybody in on what that entails?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. During the February 17th quarterly capital project meeting, there was discussion about whether the 2024 Parks and Tourism Revenue Bonds could be spent on the Henry C. Chambers Waterfront Park project. The city contacted Lawrence Flynn, the city's bond counsel with Pope Flynn, and he stated that the city could ask for the bond purchaser's consent, which is Webster Bank, to amend the 2024 series ordinance and expand the scope of the projects to include the waterfront park. Mr. Flynn sent a letter to Webster Bank on March 6th to ask whether it would be willing to consider providing consent to amendment to the 2024 series ordinance and the proposed reallocation of bond proceeds. Webster Bank responded they were fine with this modification. We did receive official signed letter from them saying they have approved just for the bank consent. And so I have included in the agenda a draft of the 2024 series ordinance amendment, which would require the 2 readings. So if we want to move forward, we can do this. First reading would take place on April 14th, and then second reading would take place on May 12th. So that's kind of on the bond side of things. And then just to talk about Southside Park, Phase 1 is complete, and then the site design for Phase 2 is expected to be completed in August of 2026. There will be approximately about $1.2 million remaining in the Parks and Tourism Revenue Bond funds. And we have Brandon Tursky with Davison Floyd that can discuss the available options for Southside Park with the remaining funds. We have one cost estimate right at that $1.2 million amount. And then option 2 is kind of a more scaled back version of about $816,000. Which one can I get council's direction as far as whether it's council's consideration to reallocate some of the remaining funds to Waterfront Park. And so we can kind of work through that during the April meeting on the series ordinance. But I'm happy to answer questions you may have about the bond, and then Brandon's here to answer more about the park and some of the cost estimates.
Okay, anyone have any questions?
Well, just a comment. So if we were to go with the $816,000 cost estimate, we would still be eligible for a $300,000 CDBG grant, and that would go towards, and then we could reallocate that. So we're only really spending $500,000 on that. Is that correct? If
Yeah,
were
some we haven't applied for yet, but something that we are looking
That's for the
into.
fall. It's for the fall
Right.
grant.
Yeah,
It opens up for fall, but
Yeah,
I'm just saying that would be good. And then we could
We
put
gotta
the
compete for that.
remainder, excuse me.
We have to compete for that CDBG grant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've
may or
got a
may not
good-
get it.
We're shovel ready. We've got a good chance, I feel. But if we do, and assuming we do get it, we put all the remainder in and that goes towards the waterfront park.
Yeah, I think as much as we can, we need to move there.
But I want to see that Phase 2. I would like to see it go forward.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from council?
I have only one comment. We need to find cheaper light fixtures.
Pricey.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Buy cheaper everything in that estimate.
yeah, I guess what shocked me was the cost of the
I'm
dog
going to
park.
Amazon for some of this. stuff.
Cameras is what got me.
Yeah, but the dog park in total just
Yeah.
blew me away. I mean,
It's dusk
a
to
dog
dawn,
park.
isn't it?
It's a dog park. Sorry, Ken. That one.
but, were any questions for Alan, or
Brandon here too. I guess Brandon, want to come out just
Yeah.
to explain a little bit about the 2 phases.
you can get the price down, right?
Yes, sir. I do have comments and questions, but I was waiting to see if Councilman Mitchell had anything.
I'm good.
Okay. So my first question would be, looking at the 2 different options, and I'm glad that you're here, by the way, to provide some explanations and clarification on this. It looked like one of the things that was deleted from option 2 was demolition at $50,000. And I guess the question is
What are we not
what,
demolishing?
what was demolition or going to be demolished that is no longer needed to be in the scaled down proposal?
Can you tell me what line item you're looking at?
Yeah, sure. It is
C1,
C2,
I mean, C2, C2.
C2, on option 1 is where you
It's
see
regarding the
demolition,
existing field
$50,000.
drainage.
You
Yeah,
don't see
field
that
drainage.
on option 2, which is.
Yes,
the
sir.
skip.
So that would be we're gonna be grading the fields. Currently, there's a low spot in that area, that's holding water. And so that is, taking into account the trees and items in that area.
That's the $50,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
A lot of dirt.
yeah, I guess my comments, I'll just keep them brief and simple. I have gone through, compared both of these options, looked at what was removed to come up with the difference. When we originally bonded for this in January of '24, I felt like this was a good intent. That was prior to us getting the report for the waterfront park that indicated severe deterioration. And then fast forward a year, June in '25, it was determined that we needed to shut down the promenade. That park, in my mind, has become priority. So understanding that we are in motion with this and we have plans in front of us, my personal take is that we need to put a bow on that park, south side, and roll any funds that we can, as much as we can, to getting the waterfront park back opened. The way that I have scaled that down is essentially spending no more than $200,000 out of the 1.2 that remains on south side. And I've identified where I think that could be, just obviously my own personal opinion, but I would like to see us move over about $1 million into funding the waterfront park so that we can be ready when we get to that point.
And I'll second that. I think that's important.
Not,
Reason we did
not
this-
that we're making decisions.
Well, I know, but you know,
Well, I
I
don't
shouldn't
support,
say second.
I do not support that. I mean, the waterfront park is our #1 priority, but we have more in the city than just waterfront park.
Well, I know
We're
that. We're
gonna
not,
shut down all activity in Pigeon Point.
but we're
Indian
not
Point,
spending all of it.
everything else.
We're not spending all of it.
No, I'm not saying spend it all, but he's saying take $1 million of it, which is pretty much most of it.
Well, here's the problem. We've asked for 10 million from the state, and we may or may not get that. But if you got $100 million project or more, who knows what it's going to cost for the waterfront park? 10% of that's going to be your design and engineering. And so where are we going to get that money? We may have to find it from wherever we can get it. So $1 million here, $1 million there.
Or we're going to fund everything else in the city, everything the
No,
city
no,
shuts
no,
down,
no.
basically, is what
But
I'm.
any extra cash that we can do, some things can be delayed. They're not being.
We're going to delay Duke Street and all that, not putting city money into that, is what I'm saying. If we're going to take the money from that, or we could just shut the whole city down just so we can do the waterfront, which
Well-
does need to be done. But the city has got a lot more projects than just the waterfront park.
Well,
But a lot of those projects are funded with funds that are grants that expire. And so because we're so far in motion with those, it does make sense to continue that effort. However, these are different. These are bonded against our local A-tax, H-tax collection. And while it did make sense at the time, now it makes more sense, at least to me, since our waterfront park is economic driver for us, Southside is not, that we make that a priority, not just in word, but in deed. And the way to do that would be to move any additional funds that we have to that project so that we don't have to scramble for funding when we get to that point. We would have at least, even if we have to go for grant funding, which we know that we'll have to, the more money that we can bring to the table, the more prepared we are and the better chances we have at securing those fundings. And I think we need to be as prepared as we can. So it's not that Southside's not important. It's not that we don't get this to the finish line. It's just that this is something that, if delayed, is not going to be a detriment to the businesses that are established. Whereas if downtown is delayed, that would absolutely be a detriment to the city.
anyone else?
Oh, you know how I feel. You can go ahead
We're not
and
voting,
go ahead
so-
and boo me.
I don't think any of us don't see the waterfront park as being the preeminent issue that we're dealing with. And we do need to be very conservative on all of our funds with reference to the availability of grant funding. And fortunately and hopefully, we will have our regional and state and federal partners helping us as well. But grant opportunities require fund matching, and with that in mind, we need to keep all our reserves available for that. So.
Any other questions?
I have, this, pardon me, wow.
Don't get choked up.
So I understand from Neil's perspective how passionate he is about this because he's been nursing this for a long time. Neil, how do you think if you could somehow survey the residents of Mossy Oaks in that area, which the park primarily sits, how do you think they would feel if we were to prioritize the waterfront park, knowing that it's just a delayed completion of Pigeon Point, not an end to Pigeon.
South side.
South side, I'm sorry, south side.
Well, it was delayed for over 25 years and I came on council. I mean, it had been promised like 20 years before from previous councils. They kept saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And when I ran, I said, you know, I'm going to get this done, which we did get the playground. I promised the playground there. We did get it done. As far as the rest of it, I feel like it's still an open promise to them and we need to get it. They're going to be very upset and I'm glad I'm not the one running this year for council because people in Mossy Oaks are going to be very upset that their park was defunded.
Well, I don't think we're saying defunded. I think we're saying delayed. I mean, this would be.
Well, delayed is
budget
defunded.
requirement. This would be a budget requirement going forward that the park is going to get completed. You know, it's not like it's delayed with certain determination that it's going to be completed. It's so I don't know.
Delaying
I
is
hear what you're-
defunding it. Delaying is defunding it to me. It's been promised
temporarily.
until when? Can you, another 20 years?
It'll be another 20 years.
Well, they didn't think that back then.
Any other
Anyway,
comments, questions?
And I don't know if this helps you, Neil, probably not, but I'll give this to you to look at real quick. The ones that I've identified in blue there are the things that I think that I know I would be comfortable moving forward with, which would total underneath that 200,000. I mean, ideally, I'd like to move all of this over, but in essence of being respectful to the fact that the promise was made for this park, and that we do have these plans in place, at least getting it to a stopping point that allows for the dog park to be renovated to a degree. But I think that we can really, really tone down what the request is here. And again, it's not defunding to not move this forward indefinitely. It is just a delay because we had this unexpected situation that came up that we really need to address and that a lot of businesses rely on.
you don't want to see the disc golf.
It's not a priority to me over the waterfront, no.
Disc golf is
What's your priority, Neil?
both of them, between the,
Yeah, well, if you got.
between the waterfront, the
Where,
waterfront is the city's number one
no, but I'm talking
priority.
about right now on item 1 or option 1 or 2.
Oh, the option 2,
Yeah.
the cheaper, the 800,000 would be, you know, the,
2?
yes. That's the 800,000, I believe.
Yeah, and you seem
With,
pretty assured that we're going to get a CDBG grant to knock that down to.
well,
With
aside
the
from
company.
the disc golf, Neil, what did you think about the items that were highlighted here?
It's more, it leaves things incomplete really, because, when you start leaving out, the ADA walks, concrete ADA parking,
The ADA parking
human
restricting is
drinking
cheap.
fountain, agility course, a
Well,
number of things. I mean, it
No,
doesn't-
I guess let me
it doesn't
explain.
live up to the spirit of what we're trying to
Well,
do.
let me explain. So on here you have the water service you have to provide, but then you have a dog drinking fountain ×2 that comes out to 17,000, and then a human drinking fountain with a bottle filler. I think that you can have one dog fountain and one human fountain. And then the dogs can share a fountain and the humans can have their fountain, but you don't really need to have two dog fountains right now. Those
One
are
for
the
the
things
big
that.
park and one for the small park.
I know, I get that, but I think that we could do a better job at still meeting the need, but scaling it down. And so while I understand the point that you're making as far as it being incomplete, it gets a bow on it and it gets it to a stopping point to where then we can redevote and commit our focus to waterfront and come back to this.
Yeah, and you've got other things in here like landscaping outside the gate, outside the fence. That's not a big priority to me. And the one thing that I'm concerned about, it says shredded hardwood mulch surfacing, 4-inch depth, large and small dog areas. That's almost $99,000. I mean, if you got mulch and a dog goes to the bathroom in the mulch, how do you get it up?
Very carefully.
You'd be pulling up mulch is what I'm saying, so. That 4 inches goes down to 3 inches and then 2 inches.
You're throwing away a lot of that 99,000.
Yeah.
Some things I could see, but like say the disc golf is one thing I definitely am holding on to.
That's not that expensive in the overall scheme of things.
My factored in expenses would be basically at $192,000. And then if you feel confident that we're going to get a CBDG grant and we can use an additional potential $300,000, then maybe there's a lot more that can be done. But I don't think that we should be using our local A-tax, H-tax for this park at this point, especially now that we have approval to recommit these funds.
We're already using it to repay
pavilions
the
cut-
debt.
You had the
I
pavilions
had the
cut out?
pavilions cut, yes.
You should go down there and look, watch the need for it. And there, I go there all the
I
time.
left
and-
the picnic tables.
Well, I go there and they're sitting under those little tent type things and then certain days the sun's beating down on them. They really, were appreciating this. I told them that that was coming and, oh, they were so happy, a number of them in there. I go by there all the time talking to the people.
I understand that, but I'm also talking to the businesses downtown.
So what are we trying to get out of this, Alan, is, what do you need from us?
Mayor and council, if I can just interject for a moment.
Sure.
The primary objective that staff wants to get out of the discussion about the dog park is what are your priorities in the dog park? Do you want the disc golf? Do you want the dog park? What order do you want them in? We just need some direction so we can put together a proper capital projects budget when we bring you the FY27 consolidated budget. So in terms of the CDBG, we're getting ready to close out 2 CDBG grants, which will make us eligible for 2 more CDBG grants. I can't guarantee that we'll actually get a grant for Southside Park, but I do know that it should be eligible. And I do know that it should be competitive. And so my confidence is high, but I can't guarantee it. But it's definitely something we will pursue with CDBG grant money.
Do we have the LMI figures to justify?
I believe the LMI will qualify there.
Okay.
Yeah, I had, LCOG about it,
They
to
said it
some
was-
people, and they said we stand a good chance. They couldn't guarantee it either, but they said that we'd be very competitive.
And when does that get released?
It's in the fall.
Fall.
I'm not sure when they make the decisions, but it has to be done through September, I think it is, isn't it?
September, I think, is when we.
Yes, we could compete for the grant, and then should we be awarded the grant, we can bring you an amendment to the budget to account for that.
Okay. Does that work for everyone? Okay. That good with y'all?
So what are we doing?
Amended, he's gonna come back with an amended budget later on, for this.
I guess based on our discussion, where would you
Well, so-
believe that falls?
Well, so in the meantime, I'll get back to that in just a moment. But in the meantime, we also would like to know what your general feeling or consensus is. We can't take a vote in this session,
Right.
but what your consensus or general feeling is with regard to using the remaining 1.2 million for the waterfront park, or whether you want to parcel some of it out to do part of Southside Park. So that's really what we're trying to get out of you this evening so we can move forward.
Do you have the option 2 list in front of you by chance?
I do.
Okay, and again, this is just mine, but I prepared some highlighted points that I think are priority for me as far as putting a bow on this. So if you have option 2 in front of you and you start at B, which is the dog park.
Right.
I've highlighted site prep, the fence exclosure, the entrance gates, the maintenance gates, and then down to item 8, the water service, Item 9, the dog drinking fountain. I think that we should have one dog drinking fountain and one human drinking fountain. Down to item 15, rules signs. 21, picnic tables. 22, trash receptacles. And then subsection C, I've highlighted mobilization, soil stripping, silt fence, earthwork, and landscaping, so all of those. And that's it, and the total comes out to 192,000.
Are you leaving out the ADA?
Yes.
Of course, this will be a council decision and staff will proceed accordingly. I would ask you to reconsider on some of the dog park options. For example, the drinking fountains. There should be one in the small dog section, one in the large dog section, because those dogs cannot commingle for safety reasons. And so that makes it difficult to have just one drinking fountain. But I will say that with it being pared down the way that we're paring it down, we could do that. But then you're not improving a whole lot in that dog park. So I'm not sure you would want to go for those options or whether you wouldn't want to wait until you can find an actual quality dog park, which is what I think we did. We have patrons who visit there quite frequently. And so I think they deserve a quality dog park. So the question is whether we want to give them half a dog park or whether we want to wait until we can give them a full dog park. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's got to be one of your primary questions you need to answer.
Scott, will we know whether we'll get the CDBG grant in time to make a decision on how we move forward with these figures?
For the FY27 budget,
Yeah.
we will not.
No.
That's why staff needs some direction from you on how to proceed.
Is there a way that we can agree on a figure and then the details of what is factored into that can be flexible so that we can find some consensus there? But let's say we decide tonight that 200,000 or 250,000 or whatever it is the consensus that we'll set this aside for the remainder of what we can knock out in phase 2, and then the additional gets rolled over and recommitted to Waterfront Park. And then should we be able to get the CBDG grant, we can factor away that we could just focus on a figure that we agree on, and then the details can change.
I think it would be prudent to do something like that, where you identify a certain amount of that 1.2 million that you are willing to part with for Southside Park. And we put that in the budget for Southside Park construction, and we chase a grant or 2 grants, whatever we can chase for Southside Park, that will qualify for. And then we see where we are, and then we come back to the table and see what we can do. I'd rather have a good dog park than a dog park that's not much better than we have now.
Are there park and recreation grants that are available?
There are PARD grants that may be available. I'm not sure what the balance on the remaining PARD funds for Beaufort County are, but we can check into that.
There may be some ADA funds also.
Correct.
That would be some of those grants, and they're very favorable, especially with recreation.
Yep.
Can we agree on 200,000? The rest being rolled over to the Waterfront Park?
250.
Do I hear
What was that? What was that?
275?
No, you're 275, 300.
You need an auctioneer.
So are we just, I mean, it seems like the emphasis is on the dog park itself, which is 538,000. What if we just did the dog park and defer everything else?
So you're saying you want to spend $600,000 of this on the phase 2 of Southside?
Just, yeah, on South Side, do the dog park and defer everything else?
Or maybe go 275 towards the dog park and work on other grants to do 538.
Yeah, because we can't use the grant money to go towards Waterfront Park. So,
Right. I would feel very uncomfortable spending 600,000 at this point.
On the
I
dog?
definitely want to see that disc golf go in there. What-
You gonna play?
it's
I'm
gonna be
not gonna
named
play.
after him.
I could support 250,000. I don't know that I would feel comfortable going back, because I really think that we should try to recommit as much of this as we can. We're gonna be in a better position for it down the road. And there's other grant opportunities that we can look at that we haven't exhausted yet.
Get you
I only suggested 275 because that was about half of the 538. That was the reason for my going for the 25 more.
Okay, we got 2 for 275. I'll make it 3. Just so we can move this along. Neil, it's all on you now.
How much you going at? 3?
Right, well, I got 3 for 275.
I guess 275 is it. I'm very reluctant about it, but,
You can make that known.
So we'll,
it will be
You
known.
want to make it a,
Whether it's 275 or 3, you're still going to be waiting on a substantial grant to finish the Southside Park. So it's
Yeah.
of little consequence which one you choose.
Yeah.
Except you would be able to put $25,000 more into the waterfront park.
I can get on board with 275.
okay. Going once? You got an idea?
Yeah, we do. We'll go through the budget process and we can hash out some more fine-tuned numbers.
Okay. We have someone online, John?
Yes, Mr. Trask.
Hey, Graham Trask, 1211 Bay Street. I just wanted to commend the council on the discussion that you've just had. I think that things have really changed since the allocation, conceptual allocation of the money to Southside. This is I see it from my perspective as a temporary reallocation of the money. And then once things improve, things are under control in Waterfront Park, to then go back to Southside Park. Neil, I know this is a disappointment, but I think even you can see that the Waterfront Park is a priority, which was unforeseen when the decision was made for Southside Park. So I just wanted to commend the city council on the direction it seems to be going. But may just make one other comment related to this, which it seems you're going to talk about in your executive session. There's other profit ways to generate money for the city and not spend it on things that aren't a priority. You seem to be talking about one in your executive session. I hope that you will not reallocate that money someplace else other than to the waterfront park. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Guess we can move on to hospitality. Oh, somebody. Oh, Jared. Okay. Stand up, get in line. Yeah, we gotta.
Jared Madison again, 2618 Holmes Drive. So ignorant again about the subject somewhat. So why wouldn't we be allocating all available funds to the waterfront park? And my analogy is, let's say you have a few health issues, hearing loss, tennis elbow, arthritis, but your heart is not working as well. You only had a limited amount of time and funds to allocate to fixing one of those things. Wouldn't your primary goal be to fix your heart first? Now, and I say that because I've been doing a little research around the city, and interviewing people about the waterfront park. And one thing I heard from people visiting from New Jersey, they're like, okay, well, what's going on? And I hear that a lot because I live downtown. What's going on? And I kind of told her like the pillars and everything, and she said, like it's a shame because this is really the crown jewel of Beaufort. So if other people could recognize that it's a crown jewel, I'm not aware and a little bit confused why we wouldn't allocate every available fund we have to fixing that crown jewel, if even people that don't live here feel that way.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared.
Welcome.
Bill Mack.
Good evening. Long night. Hoping we'll be short here.
You keep it short and then we'll get through it.
They moved us forward here a little bit. Joe Mack, 1809 Boundary Street. I'm not taking a point of view. I just had a couple points about the dog park and the disc golf. I did look at it. It looked like $500,000 for the dog park. As you know, the playground did not go in there first. The dog park was that was the first thing that went in that park 10, 15 years ago. It says in there as a line item, I guess, it's concrete paths, as part of that, to spend money there between the dog parks or something, 17,000 square feet of concrete. That sounds, impervious. And it says in there for ADA, I guess that's for the humans, not the dogs. Maybe I need to go buy a dog, but
No, it's humans.
I got a little sticker shock on that, $500,000 for a dog park when it's been there for 10, 15 years. And then the disc golf, so yeah, I was trying to learn up on disc golf. So they have, beginner, intermediate, and they got, the Tiger Woods level, expert level disc golf. That doesn't look like an expert, course with knowing how that park is situated. So I did stumble onto a Facebook group for this area for disc golf. I've never played it, but I guess I don't know if they played it, but they had an old post saying they were going to go play in the fall of last year at Southside Park. They called it pop-up disc golf. Maybe y'all are aware of this. So, yeah, your waterfront park is broke. It's broke. So I think the more important thing with the waterfront park, and most everybody knows this, is the urgency, the initiative. Because, people in town, they want to develop this corner, that corner, they go get a waiver if they need it, or they get an exception, and obviously Josh is on the committee. You don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to rush it, but you can't take too long, and the people are suffering down there. But I think the urgency is more important than the money. The money always helps, but we don't get much in Beaufort. Charleston, they get everything, and it's more people, but it should be our turn. But y'all handle that. But yeah, that is a lot of money, and I can't imagine it would cost $100 million to fix the waterfront park, but you never know.
It'd be more than that.
But
Might be less than that. Be positive.
I am
50.
trying to be.
It costs more than the dog park, I'll tell you that. But I thank y'all.
Thank you. Yes, Rob. Can you be quick? Because we've got some people who've been waiting all night long in the back to do the Baja.
It'd be very quick. If I was sitting in your chair, I would spend 100% on waterfront park. That is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 priority. I would spend 0 on Southside. They're in a place that they wouldn't have been without leadership up here, especially you, Neil. I would say, listen, that is a future of Beaufort. We need to spend everything. We need to demonstrate fiscal responsibility. And Scott, you make a good point. Half a loaf is not very good. They want a full loaf. They're disappointed. But you compared to waterfront park, I think if you took a survey, you're gonna get 90% saying waterfront park. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Alan, next is the hospitality fee, the 1.1% and the 5% distribution discussion.
Yeah. So the city ordinance includes a 5% hospitality fee distribution to the city's DMO and a 1.1% hospitality fee distribution for nonprofits for advertising to increase tourism and revitalization of the downtown economy. And I put together just a little memo just to kind of show what the current ordinance says with hospitality fees, kind of the purpose and the intent, the hospitality fee, and then kind of breakdown of the 5%, the 1.1%, and then the remaining is a 93.9%. And then also provides some financial history for the past number of fiscal years as far as how the 1.1% has been distributed, along with the 5% distribution, just to kind of give council a little reference for that. So Baja has provided information for council's consideration regarding the 1.1% hospitality fee. I just feel like now is a good time just to kind of look at this ordinance and see whether we need to make any changes or whether we want to keep everything the way it is. We have Ashley Hawk here from Baja, and looks like she got a lot of her board members here as well. So we might kind of turn over to Ashley just to kind of talk a little bit about what was requested in her letter.
I'm actually.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Nick, you doing this? Okay.
Well, I'm going to introduce Ashley.
Okay.
How's that? You gave away my big ending. So Nick Borgini here. I'm the chairman of Baja. Most of you know me as a Port Royal business owner. But I do own a property on Bay Street, and I have an active Beaufort City business license. I also, we also sell beer to 25 to 30 Beaufort businesses. So, in 2005, myself, David Blake, and Lance Price started the original Beaufort Hospitality Association. And we were, back then, we received these funds systematically without a grant process. During that time, we produced a dining guide. We bought some advertising, some billboards, and then we also assisted the Chamber of Commerce with the Great Chefs of the South dining event. I think we did that 3 years. So basically what we're doing is we're basically asking for those funds back. Our association back then was not as well solidified in the community as it is now. We eventually did turn those funds over to Main Street for the purpose of better buying power. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Ashley to answer any questions that we had. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Good evening, council. Is everyone still awake? That was a rough one. Well, I think you all saw my letter. I don't really want to make this any more lengthy than it needs to be, but I've been acquiring these funds since 2020. And whenever I went to do the initial grant process, I believe Kaiserling and Stephen Murray were on that board and or on council, and they said, you know, you need to work with the community and we need to figure out how this works for everyone. And I think that that's something that we've showcased these last 5 years in acquiring these funds, is that we collaborate with numerous people within this community, organizations, and we represent everyone. And Mitch, I think you said it very well earlier, that we need to focus on everyone in the entirety. And this funding, as the ordinance stands currently, states that it is the downtown core. Well, we serve businesses within the city outside of the core. I think RLB Distillery is a prime example of something we have just lost that was unique to our area and special, especially to my association. And we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that continue. And we want to continue to represent these businesses and bring activation, local marketing. We formed a relationship with Harris Teeter. I think that is quite substantial in being able to acquire the fireworks for downtown. We also leverage a grant through the county. And I just think that showcases exactly what kind of a catalyst various funding can be throughout our area. So I would open up, you know, for questions, but I think that that is a big issue within the ordinance, that it's specific to the downtown core and that funding should be spread throughout the city of Beaufort.
I think it's inferred, it says downtown economy, and we have to define what downtown is, because it's obviously beyond the core.
Yes.
I mean, it can go all the way up to Boundary Street and all that, but yeah, I'm in favor of this. I don't really see a problem with it. Makes sense. That's what it's for.
Can we put something in there that would assure that it would be spent in Beaufort, not like Port Royal or elsewhere that they cover? We need to.
Let's talk
have
about downtown Beaufort.
Yeah, I think the city of Beaufort would be a great terminology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well, Neil. I think that's a good point. Just to ensure that any funds that we do set aside for this or commit to, in this case, Baja, would be spent citywide. But I do agree that we should spread out and support all hospitality businesses throughout the city. And so, yeah, I support this.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that we see you as being that representative from the standpoint of the Hospitality Association as well. And over time, and I too was on the Main Street Board when we were receiving all the funds at the time, and I was not on council then, but then soon after that. But I think it's a good shift over there. And I have some concern with some of the gifts that we've given for the hospitality, for advertising and so forth, but I think there's opportunity within the A-tax to help cover some of that, so we soften the blow from them that have received it more recently, so.
I support your proposal, Ashley.
Thanks, Mitch.
That was easy.
I don't think Neil said anything. Is he mad at me?
No, no, I
All
just
you
said
have
I'd
to
like,
do, all you have to do is present something after 4 hours of haranguing and you're good.
Real quick,
all I said was, I wanted to make sure that it was spent all in Beaufort. And also I missed trivia tonight, Nick.
yeah, Nick, next time you come here on a stressful evening like this, please bring a beer. And we can have one after.
Couldn't get through the doors, I guess, but beer's in his pocket.
We
I'm
could
not
drink
mad
it,
at you. I
so
told you I
that would
supported
be
as
great.
long as it was, we have assurances that the money would be
Yep.
spent in the city.
Absolutely.
I guess we just need to address the ordinance and clarify the language so that it can be spent throughout town.
All righty. Thank you all so much.
Thank y'all for hanging around.
Yeah.
And Nick,
Learned a lot.
we'll speak to you even if you don't have a business in town.
Oh, and I hope y'all enjoyed the show.
I'll be at trivia tomorrow night.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now we're to executive session. Does somebody want to make a
Yes.
motion?
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that pursuant to Title 30, Chapter 4, Section 70A2 of the South Carolina Code of Law, receipt of legal advice regarding appropriateness of activity in the Commerce Park. B, pursuant to Title 30, Chapter 4, Section 70A2 of the South Carolina Code of Law regarding the conveyance of property located in the Beaufort Commerce Park. Lot D, 5.25 acres, Lot B, 6.64 acres. Glad it wasn't 6.66. Lot 3, or excuse me, 3, Lot K, 7 acres, and lots A, C, E, F, H, and J, approximately 3.79 acres. And C, pursuant to Title 30, Chapter 4, Section 70A, 1 of the South Carolina Code of Law, discussion regarding personnel employed by City Council. I make a motion, we go into executive session.
Second.
Okay, we got a second, motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are now in executive session.